Chapter 2675. Fairy Hong Xia's Ice Phoenix celestial body had already been partially damaged by the yin-yang sword array. Now that the Ice Phoenix celestial body was released, an indescribable pain was transmitted into Fairy Hong Xia's body, causing her to tremble uncontrollably. Fellow Taoists, quick, block this sword light. Xiong Huasong waved his hand, no longer holding back the dermic powers in his body. His nascent soul's hand waved, and many rays of light flashed, wanting to block in front of Fairy Hong Xia. Xiang Ming and the rest scrambled to be the first, hurriedly waving their talismans to protect Fairy Hong Xia, their only hope of breaking the array. Jeeth! The Ice Phoenix celestial body cried out again, not without pain. From the Ice Phoenix's mouth, the connate primordial water gushed out like an upside-down waterfall, instantly covering an area of more than 100 feet. Ah? Liao Ke was really shocked. It was not that ordinary, and the rest did not consider connate items when they set up the splitting-edge 5-element sword array, but how could rare connate items be so easy to obtain? Just as Li Zongbao said, there would definitely be someone among the hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators who would have such treasures. But any treasure that had 1 or 2 drops or even 1 or 2 wisps would be considered extremely lucky. How could they have thought of that? Fairy Hong Xia's connate primordial water could not be measured with drops. It could be measured with 10 feet, 10 feet. Of course, Fairy Hong Xia was still fine. If Xiao Hua were here, not to mention connate primordial water, even a connate jellyfish would be able to scare Liao Ke to death. Not good. While Liao Ke was screaming in his heart, Xiong Huasong and the rest were overjoyed. A few of them flew up and surrounded Fairy Hong Xia. They did not hope to kill Liao Ke, but as long as they could protect Fairy Hong Xia, this array would definitely be broken. Indeed, Fairy Hong Xia did not disappoint them. Although the Ice Phoenix celestial body flapped its wings with some difficulty, the 100 feet of Xiantian primordial water grew larger and larger. It was like a blue wave that mended the heavens, smoothly supporting the falling fireflies. Although this splitting-edge 5-elemental sword formation was very strange, as every part of the formation could condense sword light out of thin air and form flying swords, to a golden core cultivator, the most threatening thing was still the swarming fireflies in the eye of the formation. Fairy Hong Xia's primordial water blocked these fireflies, causing the 5 elemental swords to be annihilated by the primordial water. Very quickly, the spirit talismans produced by the golden core cultivators began to shine brilliantly again. At this time, the golden core cultivators really couldn't care less about holding anything back. Although the hand of a nascent soul required a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi, which was far from what the formation could provide, they still channeled their true essence from their golden cores and poured their magic power into the talisman. Liao Ke could no longer hold back. With a cry, its body expanded rapidly, and with a flap of its wings, it shot towards the Ice Phoenix celestial body like a shooting star. Rumble! With a loud sound, the peacock slammed into the spirit talisman protecting Fairy Hong Xia. This strange peacock was really strong, to be able to knock the nascent soul's hand askew and rush out of the gap. The Ice Phoenix celestial body cried out in pain. It was the peacock that had stretched out its claws and grabbed onto the wings of the Ice Phoenix celestial body. How strong was the body of the peacock that could knock the nascent soul's hand away? In an instant, it tore off a piece of the Ice Phoenix celestial body's wing. Fairy Hong Xia cried out in pain. Her body trembled violently, and the Ice Phoenix celestial body trembled as well. At the same time, the Ice Phoenix celestial body fell rapidly, as if it wanted to retract into Fairy Hong Xia's body. How dare you! Dasun and Xiang Ming's nascent soul's hands grabbed at the peacock's wings at the same time. The peacock did not dare to delay and hurriedly flapped its wings and flew up. Junior disciple, hold on for a while longer. Xiong Huasong could only encourage Fairy Hong Xia. All right. Fairy Hong Xia replied. She tried her best to stabilize the Ice Phoenix celestial body, and urged the Xiantian true water to wrap around the 5 elements planetary disk. However, the closer it got to the 5 elements planetary disk, the more sword lights there were, and the more Xiantian true water was consumed. Fairy Hong Xia did not care about the consumption of Xiantian true water, but the sword qi from the sword lights was something she could not bear. Fairy Hong Xia did not temper her bones like Xiao Hua, and her body did not have the strength of 10,000 caddies. The sword qi was as heavy as a mountain, and when it collided with the true water, she was unable to take another step forward. Xiong Huasong seemed to have noticed the abnormality as well, and hurriedly shouted, "Senior Sister Hong Xia, if you have any more true water, surround it from all sides. Just hold on for a while longer." Alright. Fairy Hong Xia gritted her teeth. The Ice Phoenix celestial body was already damaged, and several more streams of true water surged out, surrounding the 5 elements planetary disk. The peacock was sent flying by the Yuanying stage's hand. It soared in midair, and with a long cry, it swooped down again. However, a loud explosion sounded, and Fairy Hong Xia's Xiantian true water was completely shattered by this explosion. The Ice Phoenix celestial body could not hold on any longer and quickly retreated into Fairy Hong Xia's body. The impact of this explosion also injured Fairy Hong Xia, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face was pale, and she almost fainted in midair. Amidst the explosion, countless sword lights scattered. The 5-colored light had already dispersed, and the 5 giant swords and the 5 elements planetary disk were scattered in midair. What made Xiong Huasong and the rest happy was that the 5 flying swords were much dimmer than before. They must have used up a lot of energy to activate this sword formation. Fellow Taoists, this is the best time to kill this fiend. Hung Heng waved the spirit talisman in his hand, and the giant hand flashed in midair, grabbing at one of the flying swords. The powerful restrictive force immediately passed through space and covered the giant hand. That's right. Xiang Ming shouted, and several golden core spirit talismans swayed as they flew over. Ha! A shrill voice sounded out. We have been setting up this formation for 8 years, and we wanted to kill 100,000 cultivators. Who knew that the heavens were unfair, and the formation was broken by a foundation establishment cultivator. I am not resigned to this. I will not yield. As he spoke, the giant yellow-red sword light suddenly shone brightly. It was the transformation of the white and fat swordswoman. What is there to love in life? What is there to fear in death? And here, sword domain, transforming into a sword to support the snowy mountains. The giant green sword also let out a hearty laugh, and then light scattered in all directions. Fellow swordsmen. The 5 elements planetary disk gradually revealed its ordinary figure, and its plain face revealed a look of shock. Even Liao Ke, who was far away, was shocked. We swore to kill 100,000 cultivators, and now there are only a few tens of thousands left. How can we meet LV Genyu? How can we meet the fallen swordsman of sword domain? Within the pitch-black sword light, Bai Tianming's voice was extremely solemn as he said, "We have made up our minds. Fellow swordsmen, there is no need to stop us." Ha! The 3-sword sect is already like this, how can we not follow? Xiao Jinding's arrogant voice also came from the silver-white sword light. There was no movement within the giant blue sword, but the sword light suddenly shone brightly. This was Luo Shuilan's will. Enough. Ordinary shouted. If you don't have my help, how are you going to kill 100,000 cultivators? As he spoke, Ordinary's figure disappeared again, and the 5 elements planetary disk shone with bright starlight. Oh no. Dasun and the rest were shocked. Knowing that the swordsman was going to fight like a cornered beast, they quickly withdrew the spirit talismans in their hands. At this moment, the pitch-black sword light flashed rapidly, flying towards Fairy Hong Xia. I will kill this woman first. Dodge! Xiang Ming shouted hurriedly, activating the spirit talisman in his hand. However, he was already retreating, and if he hurriedly activated it again, how could he block the giant sword in time? In an instant, the sword light had arrived beside Fairy Hong Xia. How could Fairy Hong Xia possibly dodge such an attack that was comparable to a sword? Xiao Hua. Fairy Hong Xia's body was already supporting herself in midair. At this moment, her face was calm as she closed her eyes and murmured, Unfortunately, Xiaohua was now trapped in the Brahma Golden Palace, fighting with Yu Tong. How could he appear here? How dare you hurt my Dao sect disciple? Just as Fairy Hongxia was about to die, a loud shout came from the side. It was Li Zongbao who was guarding the left side. The immortal piercing whip was like a dragon as it struck towards the giant's sword. Of course, Li Zongbao was only in the late foundation establishment stage, and the immortal piercing whip was only in the early golden core stage. It could not block a sword attack, but how could Li Zongbao not use the immortal piercing whip? Boom! With a loud sound, the immortal piercing whip was like a lonely golden dragon as it was struck by the sword. However, the sword was also struck by the huge force of the immortal piercing whip. It brushed past Fairy Hongxia's robe and flew out. Bai Tianming was also at the point where he was about to die. Lucky! Xiang Ming exclaimed in his heart. However, Li Zongbao spat out a mouthful of blood and his body withered in midair. Big Senior Li! Fairy Hongxia broke out in cold sweat and hurriedly flew down. She touched her storage bag and took out the elixirs given to her by Xiaohua. She hurriedly took one for herself and gave another to Li Zongbao. I have my own. Li Zongbao waved his hand and rejected her flatly. Xiaohua gave this to me. Fairy Hongxia said hurriedly. Li Zongbao looked at the ugly elixir in Fairy Hongxia's hand and frowned slightly. He whispered, "Oh?" It was as if he had understood something, but also as if he was confused. However, Li Zongbao took it without hesitation and swallowed it. However, before he could circulate his energy to dissolve the elixir, he heard 5 consecutive loud explosions. 5 balls of sword light rushed wildly from 5 different directions towards the surrounding cultivators. At the same time, under the activation of the 5 elements planetary disk, countless 5-colored sword lights rushed out from the ground. These sword lights were attracted by the 5 balls of sword light and turned into 5 element swords that were a few feet long. They stabbed wildly towards the Dao sect cultivators. This last bloodbath of the 5 element swords formation was 10 times more powerful than the previous one. The individual sword lights were several times faster than the previous one. The power of the sword chi was also several times stronger. In just a moment, continuous screams could be heard everywhere and blood was everywhere. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the continuous 5-colored sword lights gradually disappeared. Chapter 2676. When they looked at the sky again, the strange peacock had already flown away. The 5 elements planet plate also did not transform into an ordinary body. With a flash in the sky, it disappeared just like how it had appeared before. No one knew where it went. Calm down, calm down. Seeing the sorrowful scene, the group of Dao sect practitioners did not know what to do. There were even many disciples with strong Dao hearts who were hysterical. They looked around with red eyes, as if they were about to attack at any time. Heng Zhao and the rest knew that the minds of these disciples had been invaded by the madness of the 6 sword practitioners. How would they dare to be negligent? They hurriedly flew into the sky and shouted, "The sword practitioners' formation has been broken by us. Take some pills and meditate for a while." More than 10 golden core cultivators stood in 4 different directions and cried out anxiously. The other golden core early stage and late stage foundation establishment disciples also came to their senses and flew to different directions, comforting the disciples of the various sects one by one. Cough cough, senior brothers, junior brothers. Li Zongbao slowly flew up, his body covered in blood. His voice was a little hoarse and low, but his tone was firm. We have broken this formation. 5 second-grade illusory swordsmen are nothing more than this. Compared to the 3rd-grade illusory sword Qinjian, they are far inferior. With that said, Li Zongbao pointed at Fairy Hongxia, who was not far away, and smiled. It's Fairy Hongxia from Huanhua sect. It's our junior sister, who is only at the middle foundation establishment stage, who broke this so-called 5 elements splitting-edge sword formation by herself. Think about it. How powerful can sword practitioners be? Didn't they just rely on an encirclement? Didn't they just have hundreds of thousands of swordsmen hiding in the dark? How can those cowardly swordsmen, who do not dare to fight openly with us Taoist sect cultivators, be a match for us? Fairy Hongxia's face was slightly red, and she immediately understood Li Zongbao's meaning. She hurriedly flew to Li Zongbao's side and smiled. That smile was so shy that it made Zijihua blush. Senior brothers, although we are in danger and have exhausted our powers, we can still break through this formation. But, with just my own dermic powers, I can break this array. There's no other reason. My Dao sect has countless dermic spells, and none of them are something that the barbarian sword cultivators of Huan country can touch. Isn't this 5-elemental sword array my Dao sect's 5-elemental array? Little sister had only used a few drops of innate primordial water to break their formation. Little sister really didn't know what to say anymore. These 5 illusory swordsmen were probably too ashamed to meet their master, so they had no choice but to self-detonate. Ha ha ha, even though Fairy Hongxia repeated Li Zongbao's words a lot, and even some of her words did not convey her meaning, the last sentence made everyone laugh out loud. Although the comforting words of Heng Zhao and the others were somewhat effective, they were golden core cultivators after all. Their mental state was different from that of most foundation establishment cultivators. It was a form of intimidation that came from above. But Fairy Hongxia was different. She was only a female cultivator in the later stages of foundation establishment. She looked extremely beautiful, and even seemed a little weak. If a female cultivator like her was not afraid, the male cultivators' hearts would naturally be filled with a desire to win, and even a determination to protect her. Therefore, Fairy Hongxia's words were much more effective than Heng Zhao and the rest's comforting words. The group of cultivators gradually calmed down, and the faith in their hearts was restored. After all, everyone had seen with their own eyes that Fairy Hongxia had controlled the innate primordial water to force the 5 elements planetary disk to respond. Just a drop of innate primordial water was enough to break the eye of the array. What about innate primordial fire? What about other innate items? They must be able to do it too. And these items were not rare in the hands of cultivators. If Fairy Hongxia could do it, they naturally believed that they could do it as well. It was just that they were too far away from the 5 elements planetary disk. Faith was the most magical thing. For example, Zhong Pei and the rest had consumed spiritual seeds. Although they could change their physiques according to the spiritual seeds in order to adapt to the changes in the heaven and earth spiritual qi, this adaptation was useful for ordinary people. To them, it had little effect. But why did their cultivation progress so rapidly? It was because they believed that they could succeed. They believed that they could rely on the spiritual seeds and Taoist Zhao's magical cultivation to succeed. Therefore, they succeeded. This could be explained by a firm Dao heart. Everyone in the sword formation was the same. Previously, their Dao hearts had been destroyed by the bloodbath. After Fairy Hongxia's words, they changed their minds. Their Dao hearts were strengthened, and the entire sword formation was stabilized. Even the morale of the cultivators was boosted. Great! Heng Zhao and the rest heaved a long sigh of relief. Heng Zhao looked at Li Zongbao with gratification, and then looked deeply at Fairy Hongxia. His eyes shone with a trace of brilliance. Xiang Ming was even more delighted. The credit for breaking the formation belonged to the Huanhua sect. After Li Zongbao's words and Fairy Hongxia's encouragement, the morale of the entire battlefield changed, and the name of the Huanhua sect became even more resounding. The Huanhua sect, which had always been lukewarm in the battle of Dao cultivators, was now famous. Besides the utmost happiness faction, Imperial Thunder faction, Xuanyan school, Xiantian sect, and other famous disciples, the Huanhua sect was not to be outdone. Of course, Xiang Ming looked at Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao thoughtfully. But how would Fairy Hongxia know about this? She looked at Li Zongbao's bloodstains and thought for a while. She clapped her hands and took out a jade bottle. She whispered, "Senior brother Li, can you take another pill?" If Fairy Hongxia had not mentioned this, Li Zongbao might not have thought of it. But when he saw Fairy Hongxia's jade bottle, Li Zongbao activated his heart skill again, and his face was immediately filled with astonishment. "Junior sister Hongxia, this pill, how many more do you have?" Li Zongbao asked, puzzled. Oh. Fairy Hong Xia was naturally stunned. Senior brother Li, senior sister Hong Xia. At this moment, Xiao Mao's voice came from afar. This guy was also covered in blood and looked even worse than Li Zongbao. But his face was filled with joy and even excitement. You're not dead too. Li Zongbao nodded lightly. Why did you only come to find me now? Xiao Mao was used to Li Zongbao's indifference. He bowed slightly to the two of them and smiled. I've been wanting to find senior brother Li for a long time so that you can protect me. But this sword array is really messy. I don't dare to walk around blindly. I can only follow my fellow brothers. Just now when senior brother Li and senior sister Hong Xia broke the 5-element sword array, I saw the two of you. Plus, the dozens of senior brothers who joined forces with me were all killed. I had no choice but to find senior brother Li. There must be another sword array after this one. You can follow me. Fairy Hong Xia knew that Xiao Mao and Xiao Hua had some connections. She nodded slightly. Thank you, senior sister. Xiao Mao said hurriedly. Give it to me. Li Zongbao stretched out his hand and said to Xiao Mao, puzzled. What? Xiao Mao scratched his head. Elixir. The elixir that Xiao Hua gave you. Li Zongbao seemed to be a man of few words. Xiao Mao understood. He took out a jade bottle and handed it to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao took the jade bottle and crushed it. He looked inside and sniffed it. He frowned slightly and raised his head. Is there more? Xiao Mao couldn't take it anymore. He whispered, Big brother Xiao gave this to me in private. I heard that it was an elixir that he obtained with great difficulty. Senior brother Li only needs one. Nonsense, is there more? Li Zongbao couldn't be bothered to beat around the bush and asked directly. Xiao Mao felt wronged and whispered, There is more. But this is my life-saving item. Just now, I almost died. Senior brother Li, why do you need so many elixirs? Fairy Hong Xia was also surprised. She couldn't understand why Li Zongbao was so strong. She didn't know that Li Zongbao's parting love treasure mirror had already been completed. You and I are just foundation establishment disciples. In the future, we still have to rely on golden core masters to break the array. Li Zongbao only said this and didn't say anything else. Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Mao weren't stupid. They understood immediately. The two of them thought for a while and each took out a few more jade bottles from their storage bags and handed them to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao took them and said calmly, I will only give these to the Golden Core Masters and say that they are for the two of you. I won't say anything else. As for the senior uncles of Huanhua sect and Xuanyan sect, you can give them to them yourselves. As he spoke, he turned and flew into the air. Xiao Hua didn't give senior brother Li any elixirs? Once Li Zongbao left, Fairy Hong Xia whispered to Xiao Mao. I don't know. Xiao Mao was a little embarrassed. He didn't know if Li Zongbao had any. However, it was obvious that Li Zongbao didn't have any. Even if he did, it wouldn't be such a good elixir. Is senior brother Li angry? Xiao Mao asked tentatively. How would I know? Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips. She was a little embarrassed and angry at Xiao Hua's stinginess. Seeing Fairy Hong Xia turn and fly towards Xiangming, Xiao Mao also took out a few elixirs and flew towards Gao Wei. Li Zongbao's prediction was right. Many Golden Core cultivators had used the Golden Core in their Dantian to forcefully activate their talismans. Their meridians and Golden Core were damaged. It was just that the situation just now was dangerous and no one dared to be careless. There were even a few who did the same thing as Bai Tianming and the rest when they were in a desperate situation. Who would care about that little bit of damage? But at this moment, when they were adjusting their breathing, they felt that there was something wrong with their meridians. If it was a normal situation, they could just meditate and recuperate for a few days. But now it was a matter of life and death. If they didn't rush out of the sword array, they could die at any time. No one dared to underestimate these injuries. Just as the group of Golden Core cultivators were thinking about which elixirs to consume, Li Zongbao presented the elixirs. Naturally, he gave them to Heng Heng first. Heng Ju said with a smile, Master saw it all. Give this elixir to the other uncle masters. Master has another elixir here. Master, you take it? Li Zongbao didn't explain. I just took it. It's better than the elixirs of our sect. Oh. Hung Heng raised his eyebrows and looked at Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Mao, who were flying towards their respective sections. However, he had always trusted this disciple of his. He didn't hesitate and reached out to take it. But just as he was about to consume it, he was stunned. The appearance of this elixir was really too ugly. Chapter 2677. I'll be releasing more chapters in the next 2 days. I hope that fellow Taoists with monthly votes can give me some monthly votes, recommendation votes, cash, and the like. Hashtag 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 hashtag. Chapter 2678. This ugly pill did not even have a hint of medicinal fragrance. What kind of pill was this? However, when Heng Zhao saw the faint runes on the surface of the pill, his eyes flashed with surprise. Master, take it first. Everything can wait until after the battle. Li Zongbao did not hesitate to cut off Heng Zhao's line of questioning. All right. Heng Zhao swallowed it immediately. Indeed, after a short while, Heng Zhao's eyebrows trembled uncontrollably. Master, give it to the other uncle masters. Li Zongbao held up the jade bottle and said, This is the pill obtained by junior sister Hong Xia from Huanhua sect and junior brother Xiao Mao from Xuanyan sect. Come with me. Heng Zhao sighed in his heart and did not take the pill. He turned around and flew towards Dasun. Li Zongbao knew that his master was doing this for his own good. Even though the pill was not his, if he gave it to the other uncle masters, he would owe him a huge favor. However, Li Zongbao's expression did not change as he flew behind Heng Zhao. Xiang Ming had already taken the pill. When he saw Fairy Hong Xia flying over, he smiled and said, Junior sister Hong Xia, you can keep this pill for yourself. As he spoke, he looked at Li Zongbao, who was following Heng Zhao to distribute the pills. He said, This favor should have been yours. However, if you are willing to give it to Li Zongbao, I will not say anything. You have contributed so much in the battle, and Li Zongbao has also contributed greatly. You don't have to say anything to your master. Even if the sect leader comes forward, I will agree. Ah? Fairy Hong Xia was taken aback. Her face flushed red. She had not expected Xiang Ming to have such thoughts. However, just as Fairy Hong Xia was about to explain, a sigh came from behind her. Sigh, junior sister Hong Xia. This old woman has failed you. Fairy Hong Xia quickly turned around and saw that it was Mingyu. However, there were only a few disciples behind Mingyu. Ji Mingxiu and the rest were not among them. Fairy Hong Xia immediately understood. Ji Mingxiu had most likely perished. As expected, Mingyu smiled bitterly. The 5-element sword formation was really fierce just now. My powers are limited and I cannot absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from outside. Hence, I could not take care of so many disciples. Uncle Master Mingyu. Fairy Hong Xia's heart turned sour as she whispered, To be able to protect you until now, junior apprentice Sister Ji and the others have already. At this point, Fairy Hong Xia could no longer speak. The smiling faces of Ji Mingxiu and the others kept appearing in her mind. Martial uncle, this is a type of spirit pill that disciple obtained. Please take it. Fairy Hong Xia obediently passed the elixir to Mingyu. I hope that martial aunt will be able to protect even more disciples after consuming it. Because Bright Moon had protected so many Foundation establishment disciples, she had sustained some internal injuries and had not had the time to consume any pills. Now that she saw Fairy Hong Xia offering her a gift, she accepted it without hesitation. Naturally, when she saw this ugly pill, she had the same expression as Hing Ting. It seemed like judging a person by their appearance and judging a pill by their appearance were all the same. Luckily, Mingyu took into account Fairy Hong Xia's eagerness and reluctantly swallowed it. After Mingyu consumed the pill, her face instantly blossomed with surprise. Female cultivators were never as profound as male cultivators. Ming Yu immediately asked curiously, what pill is this? Why is it so effective? I don't know. Fairy Hong Xia said with a smile, I obtained it by accident. This spirit pill is even more miraculous than the 9 transformation cloud spirit pill of my Huanhua sect. Ming Yu asked in disbelief, where did you get it? At a market in Sky Patrol City. Fairy Hong Xia was proud in her heart, but her face was expressionless. Give me one. Xiang Ming had to take it seriously. Fairy Hong Xia took out another pill and smiled, I only have a few left. Yes, I understand. Xiang Ming nodded. After taking it, he looked at it and sniffed it, then said softly, this looks similar to the spring return pill from Sky Patrol City. Yes, I also thought that it was the spring return pill. Fairy Hong Xia said immediately, therefore, I used all I had to snatch many spirit pills. Then, Fairy Hong Xia said regretfully, it's a pity that this is not the spring return pill. Even if it's not the spring return pill, it must have been refined by the mysterious alchemy master. Xiang Ming took the pill and turned to look for Heng Zhao. Just now, Fairy Hong Xia had given it to him, but he had rejected it. Now, he had taken it, completely ignoring what Fairy Hong Xia had said. My fellow cultivator Heng Zhao, the spirit pill of my Huanhua sect is indeed extraordinary. Xiang Ming shouted from afar, I think it's the work of the mysterious alchemy master. Heng Zhao rolled his eyes and almost said, I've already said that I'm a disciple of the Huanhua sect and the Xuanyan sect. You don't have to make such a big fuss. However, Heng Zhao still said calmly, yes, we've all taken it. This spirit pill is indeed extraordinary. My fellow cultivator Xiang, you've already known before taking it? Well, of course, I know the efficacy of the elixirs made by the disciples of the Huanhua sect. Xiang Ming kept mentioning the Huanhua sect proudly. Desun looked at Fairy Hong Xia, who was not far away, and smiled. Previously, Li Zongbao from the Utopia sect, Xiao Mao from the Xuanyan sect, and Xiao Hua from the Imperial Thunder sect killed Qin Jian. Now, Fairy Hong Xia of the Huanhua sect has broken the array and made a contribution. She even gave us Golden Core cultivators a spirit pill. We owe her a debt of gratitude. This is a great contribution. Hee. Xiang Ming could not stop smiling. Desun knew that Xiao Mao was also part of the Xuanyan sect's spirit pill. Since Gao Wei was not around, he did not bring Xiao Mao along. After a while, many of the Golden Core cultivators had taken the spirit pills. Heng Zhao looked at the disciples resting in the sword array and said worriedly, everyone, this 5 elements splitting edge sword array has been broken by us. But we're still in the sword array. If the swordsmen suddenly attack, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it. I'd like them to attack. Xiong Huasong laughed coldly. If the sword cultivators abandon the sword array and attack directly, it'll be our fortune. Heng Zhao thought for a moment and knew that Xiong Huasong's words made sense. He had not thought it through. He nodded and said, Brother Xiong, you're indeed an expert in array formations. I can't compare to you. Everyone has their own strengths. Xiong Huasong said politely. We'd like to see what kind of sword array LV Ruochang has set up after the 5 elements splitting edge sword array. Previously, the yin-yang sword array was targeted at disciples below the foundation establishment stage. This 5 elements splitting edge sword array seems to be targeted at disciples above the foundation establishment stage. I'm afraid that the next sword array will face us Golden Core cultivators directly. At this point, Xiong Huasong's tone changed and he said in a strange tone, but I'm curious. What kind of strange sword array can a sword cultivator have that can kill us Golden Core cultivators? Was there no such thing in the previous battle? Heng Zhao asked softly. Of course there was. Xiong Huasong said weakly. But there were no records of the yin-yang sword array and the 5 elements splitting edge sword array. Therefore, I don't have a good way to break it. Therefore the Xiong will be very. Xiong Huasong wanted to say that he was looking forward to it, but he felt that it was inappropriate. He could only listen and change his tone. Fellow Taoist Heng Ming, you'd better take a look at the damage of these 2 arrays first. We'll also be able to calm ourselves and prepare for the new sword array. Heng Zhao was a little troubled. How many layers does this sword array have? I really don't know. Maybe it's already gone. Maybe there will be more in the future. Xiong Huasong shrugged as if he didn't say anything. Then, Heng Zhao instructed Li Zongbao to find disciples to check on the casualties of the cultivators. In addition, he sent a golden core cultivator to lead a dozen late-stage foundation establishment disciples to scout ahead. Now that the array had been broken to this extent, Heng Zhao and the rest were really going all out. They no longer charged blindly outside like before. They could only conserve their energy and prepare to face the enemies who had been lying in ambush for 8 years. Heng Zhao's heart ached at the thought of 8 years. This kind of planning was definitely not something he could do. Not long after, Li Zongbao flew over with a gloomy expression. Heng Zhao's heart skipped a beat when he saw his disciple who practiced the parting treasured mirror in such a state. Master. Li Zongbao transmitted his voice to him. Now our Dao sect disciples still have more than 160,000. How did we lose so many? Although Heng Zhao already had a premonition, he couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this shocking number. According to what I know, in the earliest Yin-Yang sword array, our Dao sect disciples lost close to 90,000 people. Most of them were Qi refinement and early-stage foundation establishment disciples. There were also a few golden core uncle masters. Li Zongbao said bitterly. And in the 5-element sword array just now, although there were no golden core uncle masters killed, we lost more than 100,000 people. Especially the last 5 cultivators of the second stage of the illusory sword realm. More than 40,000 people died. Heng Zhao couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The 10-direction annihilation array was already very powerful, but he had never heard Xiong Huasong arrogantly say that it could kill 40,000 swordsmen in one go. This sword array killed 40,000 cultivators in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. The sword array is indeed a great weapon. It's really different from an array. Heng Zhao murmured. He couldn't help but feel a trace of regret in his heart. Master. Li Zongbao immediately understood Heng Zhao's thoughts. He said anxiously, you don't have to blame yourself. Lu Ruochang has been lying in ambush here for more than 8 years. Even if you didn't command the disciples to pursue, she would definitely have released the bait. So, with that, Li Zongbao glanced at the other golden core cultivators and transmitted his voice again. According to the Uncle Master's thoughts, they would definitely pursue, chase, and beat the dog in the water. But Heng Zhao still wanted to say something. But Li Zongbao didn't wait for him to finish. He said, defeat and success are due to this battle. Master, now we have no way out. If we break the sword array, we will have our lives and Master's reputation will be established. If this sword array is not broken, all of this is meaningless. Master, don't think too much. Chapter 2679. That's right. Heng Zhao exhaled deeply and turned to look into the distance. Master, you're overthinking. Sometimes you even think of Qian Mo from the Imperial Thunder sect. Master, Uncle Qian is Uncle Qian, and you are you. Although Li Zongbao was shocked, he still pretended to be indifferent. Uncle Qian thinks too much and does too little. Even what he can do is too little. You're on duty in the conference hall and have been entrusted by the sect leader. You just have to do what you want. Who would be without fault? Our Utopia faction has the capital to support Master's mistakes. But the Imperial Thunder sect doesn't. Hearing this, Heng Zhao felt relieved. He was really too involved to see the situation clearly. Li Zongbao's last sentence reminded him. Yes, even if he killed hundreds of thousands of disciples, then, so what? Ping Zhenren would never punish him. But Heng Zhao's mind was set. He immediately whispered, that's strange. We've been breaking the 5-element sword formation for so long. Why haven't we heard the sound of the sword formation? Could it be that all the great arrays have been broken? Li Zongbao thought for a moment and whispered, that's possible. The Yin-Yang sword formation is more than 10 miles wide. Our Taoist sect lost nearly 100,000 people, and there are at least 300,000 swordsmen. The five-element sword formation, our Taoist sect lost nearly 150,000 people, and there are even more swordsmen. How could there not be at least 400,000? That's 700,000 swordsmen. Where did the Huan kingdom get so many swordsmen? Even if they did, would they be willing to invest? A sword formation is different from a magic formation. Heng Ming smiled. Moreover, we broke out from the same direction and didn't disperse our forces. The sword cultivators didn't really need to surround us with 300,000 swordsmen. I feel that 200,000 swordsmen would be enough. If they really had 700,000, they would have killed their way out long ago. Why would they need to set up a sword formation? You're right, master. I've learned a lot. Li Zongbao saw Heng Zhao smile and felt relieved. Besides, until now, LV Ruochang and the other swordsmen of level 3 of the illusory sword realm are still missing. I'm afraid that they were seriously injured in the 10-party annihilation formation and can't hold the fort. If they come out now, we really don't know how to deal with them. Forget it, you, Fairy Hong Xia, and Xiao Mao should make some preparations. There are some things that I know you can't do, but you have to do them. However, you must be clear in your heart that you should try your best not to do these things. After all, the Great Tao is the most important thing. Oh. Li Zongbao was stunned. Heng Zhao's, but, try your best made him a little confused. Unfortunately, Heng Ming did not explain. He turned around and flew towards De Sun and the others. Do you still have any medicinal pills? Li Zongbao flew to the side of Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Mao. Some of the Foundation establishment stage disciples around the two of them tactfully dispersed. Li Zongbao said to the two of them without any trace of politeness. There are still some left. Fairy Hong Xia had already told Li Zongbao. Now that he asked again, she hurriedly transmitted her voice. If Senior Brother Li wants some, I'll give them to you. Senior Brother, don't be angry with Xiaohua. It's not that Xiaohua doesn't want to give some to Senior Brother Li. I'm afraid he doesn't have much left himself. Give me one first. Li Zongbao said coldly, when I see that bastard, I'll settle the score with him. Seeing that Fairy Hong Xia's face was a little ugly, Xiao Mao hurriedly took out a jade bottle and passed it to Li Zongbao. He smiled and said, Senior Brother Li has always been cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Senior Sister Hong Xia, don't mind me. I've benefited a lot from following Senior Brother Li. Li Zongbao did not stand on ceremony. He took the medicinal pills and said lightly, the special task force of the conference hall originally had 3 people. Now that Xiaohua is not around, Junior Sister Hong Xia is his replacement. There's only one person left and right. The 3 of us will break through the formation together. Xiao Mao was overjoyed. However, Fairy Hong Xia's face was flushed red. When Li Zongbao said, there's only one person left and right, he only meant that whether it was Xiaohua or Fairy Hong Xia, they were all one person. However, in her ears, it was one person, 2 people, 1 person. How embarrassing! Li Zongbao did not think too much about it. He flicked his sleeves and flew away. Xiao Mao stood guard beside Fairy Hong Xia respectfully. When the blush on Fairy Hong Xia's face faded, he accompanied her and chased after Li Zongbao. Xiao Mao was clear that although Fairy Hong Xia's cultivation was higher than his and she had the protection of the innate primordial water, he still had to help Fairy Hong Xia guard against sudden attacks from sword cultivators. Even if he died, he could not let Fairy Hong Xia be hurt in the slightest. The relationship between Fairy Hong Xia and Xiaohua was still unclear. However, Xiao Mao could still remember the scene of Fairy Hong Xia and Xiaohua meeting each other. He could not repay Xiaohua much, but if he could protect Fairy Hong Xia, it was also his own goodwill. In fact, sometimes, it was not important how much one could do. The key was the kind of goodwill that was extremely important. Heng Jiao flew to De Sun's side and looked at the group of golden core cultivators. The smile on his face disappeared and he said, Fellow cultivators, have you rested well? We have already broken through 2 sword formations. I'm afraid there will be a fierce battle ahead. LV Ruochang and the other 3rd-grade illusory swordsmen have not appeared yet. We should hurry. If these strong cultivators recover, At this point, Heng Ji's expression suddenly changed slightly. That's right. Since the first two sword formations were targeted at Qi refinement and foundation establishment, then the sword formation at the back would naturally target golden core cultivators. Wouldn't LV Ruochang and the others be waiting in front? Dasun and the rest naturally understood. On the other hand, Xiong Huasong was very clear about his own formation. He smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator Heng Ming, you worry too much. Even if LV Ruochang and the rest took the elixir that martial nephew Zhong Bao brought, they would need a few days to recover. I dare to guarantee that the one in front is definitely not LV Ruochang." At the same time, Dasun's expression changed and he asked, "Fellow cultivator Heng Ming, how are the casualties of our Dao sect cultivators? I haven't heard anything from you yet." This. Heng Jiao pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "Our Dao sect cultivators have suffered heavy casualties. Right now, there are only 160,000 disciples left." Oh? Dasun and the rest's expressions changed and they looked at each other. "Why are there so many?" Xiong Huasong was a little speechless. "If we don't break through the sword formations, these 160,000 disciples will be meat on the chopping block." Heng Jiao was unable to answer. He narrowed his eyes and looked ahead. There was no longer any rain in the sword tomb and there was a slight mist. It was this mist that completely blocked everyone's vision and they could not see far. "Let's go." Xiong Huasong did not hesitate and said anxiously, "There are still no sword cries. I'm afraid that the sword formations are not ready yet. We have to act quickly." As soon as the golden core cultivators moved, the group of resting foundation building disciples also flew out. There were still quite a few surviving aura refining disciples who had long been impatient. However, their cultivation levels weren't high, so they didn't have any special power to fight back in the sword formation. Most of them relied on luck. They knew that they were flying fast and not skillfully, so they didn't dare to say anything. The remaining 160,000 Dao sect disciples remained in their original small groups. Each sect formed a simple formation and slowly flew up and advanced. Heng Jiao and the other golden core cultivators flew in front, while Li Zongbao and the other disciples followed behind. After flying for a few miles, just as everyone was starting to relax, the disciple who had gone out to scout returned. That golden core cultivator was Qi Ming from the Taiqing sect. Seeing the strange expression on Qi Ming's face, Heng Jiao's heart skipped a beat. He knew that things were not good. "Greetings, senior brother Heng Jiao." Qi Ming bowed. Heng Jiao saw Qi Ming's reaction and felt at ease. He smiled and said, "How was the scouting ahead? Looking at you, could it be that there is no sword formation left?" "That's not it." Qi Ming shook his head and said, "About 2 miles ahead, there are sword cultivators. But from what I see, it can't be considered an ambush. If you have something to say it quickly." Dasun could not help but scold, "Why are you still like this at a time like this?" Qi Ming's face was slightly red. He did not dare to argue with Dasun and said, "I was ordered to get to the point. What kind of ambush do the sword cultivators have?" Dasun's face was red with anger. He almost scolded him again. "Little brother, I can't say that there is an ambush ahead, but there are more than 10 sword cultivators hovering in midair." Qi Ming stuttered. He did not know what to say to satisfy Dasun. Junior brother Qi, speak slowly. Why are those sword cultivators hovering in midair? Are there no other sword cultivators? There is also no sword Qi or sword light on the ground." Heng Jiao smiled and said, "I see that you look very relaxed. I don't think this counts as an ambush, right?" Qi Ming heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Exactly. There are more than 10 sword cultivators hovering in midair in front of us. However, they are arranged in a strange formation. There is no sword light or sword Qi nearby. In fact, there is not even a trace of killing intent. If you say that it is a sword formation, it is definitely not. However, if it is not a sword formation, what is the use of them being in such a formation? What else?" Heng Jiao's interest was piqued. He asked curiously, "Are just looking at you? There is no movement?" Not only is there no movement, they are treating I as if I am nothing. Qi Ming was a little flustered. It seemed that he was really angry. However, there are a few second-grade illusory sword cultivators among them. I did not dare to act rashly. I only observed from afar and did not dare to approach them. What about the other disciples? Heng Jiao looked at the few disciples standing respectfully behind Qi Ming. It was obvious that there were fewer of them than the ones he had sent out. He asked, "Didn't you say that you did not make a move? Those disciples?" Qi Ming smiled and said, "When I saw that those swordsmen were ignoring us, I sent them to the left and right to go around and scout." Those swordsmen ignored you? De Sun frowned. It seems like they did not see us. Qi Ming smiled and said, "When I came back, I already thought about it. Why don't we split up and go around them?" Chapter 2680. You may leave. De Sun waved his hand impatiently. "We have our own plans on how to proceed." Qi Ming shook his head and flew to the side. De Sun glanced at Qi Ming and turned to ask, "What do you think, fellow Taoist Heng Ming?" Heng Ming pondered for a moment and frowned. What fellow Taoist Qi said makes sense. But the problem is, how can we avoid them? If these 160,000 people split up, there'll be 80,000 people. It'll be easier for the sword cultivators to defeat them. Don't listen to his nonsense. De Sun said. Although there are only a dozen sword cultivators in front, there must be many hidden sword cultivators. Even if these dozen sword cultivators go around these sword cultivators and scout the path behind them, they'll definitely die. If you don't believe me, let's go ahead and take a look. I bet that these disciples won't be able to return. Heng Ming could only laugh foolishly and say no more. Everyone flew forward again. Sure enough, when they were about 2 miles away, there were indeed more than 10 swordsmen in black swordsmanship hovering in the air. These dozen swordsmen stood in groups of 2s and 3s, but the distance between them was different. Every one of them was facing a different direction. Even the height at which they stood in midair was different. Only the one standing at the highest point was a slightly hunched, sharp-mouthed old man with a bitter expression. He was facing the 160,000 Dao sect swordsmen. Seeing the dense crowd of cultivators, the old man stretched his back and raised his arms as if he was loosening his bones. Then he said loudly, "I'm Qing Feng from the Quilted Mountain sect. I've been waiting here for a long time." Qing Feng? After ordering the disciples to stop, Heng Ming flew forward and looked around. He said coldly, "There was a person called Qing Jian previously. Could he be your relative?" Qing Feng blinked and snorted. "That's a fellow swordsman from the Three-Sword sect. He has nothing to do with me. Whether or not you have anything to do with him, that Qing Jian has already fallen." Heng Ming pointed. "Do you want to follow in his footsteps?" "That's right." A bitter smile appeared on Qing Feng's face. This old man already had this idea when senior brother Tsang Yuan died in the 10-direction annihilation Great Array. "Yes, that's right. Tsang Yuan is also from the Quilted Mountain sect. He's your senior brother." Heng Ju nodded. "However, my Dao sect has always been merciful. If you and I have already suffered many casualties, why don't we stop here and wait for the nascent soul masters to arrive?" De Sun and the others were not far behind Heng Ju. When they heard Heng Ju's words, they couldn't help but be taken aback. They turned their heads slightly to look at Xiong Huasong. Xiong Huasong raised his head to look at De Sun. His eyes narrowed slightly as if he was thinking of something. "Ha!" Qing Feng raised his head to the sky and laughed. "The Great Array is already here, and you still dare to say such words. Do you think this old man is a 3-year-old child? What a joke." Heng Ju's expression didn't change. He said calmly, "Previously, your Huan country's Yin-Yang Sword Array and 5-Element Sword Array had already killed hundreds of thousands of my Dao sect cultivators. The 200,000 to 300,000 sword cultivators that your sword cultivators besieged my cultivators probably don't have any spare energy to fight anymore, right? Previously, my Dao sect's 10-direction annihilation Great Array also killed tens of thousands of sword cultivator disciples. It can be considered a draw. It's reasonable for you and I to return separately. Now, your sword array, no matter how powerful it is, can it be more powerful than the previous 2 sword arrays? Do you have any extra disciples that you can use? Ha! Hengju, do you think that sword cultivators only have disciples that they can use? Qing Feng laughed. Even if I don't have any disciples, this old man can still kill all of you. Qing Feng, what sword array is this? Hengju hesitated slightly before asking. This old man will naturally tell you the name of this sword array. Qing Feng gritted his teeth. But not now. Is this really a sword array? Hengju felt incredulous. He released his divine telekinesis and looked up and down, but he didn't see any signs of sword light. Unexpectedly, Qing Feng didn't answer his question. Instead, he looked up to the north and said with melancholy, "Time is long, and the past is long gone. This old man never thought that I would be able to talk so much nonsense with you. Moreover, this nonsense actually makes this old man feel very comfortable. In this life, only when you're about to lose it do you realize that normal is the best." What? Hengju was shocked and quickly retreated. Clearly, he understood the meaning behind Qing Feng's words. Qing Feng had already made his decision. Buzz, a roar came from the top of Qing Feng's head. Hundreds of feet above, a yellow-skinned swordsman appeared. The swordsman's body was extremely muscular, and there was a faint light surging around him. The surrounding heaven and earth spirit qi quickly gathered toward the swordsman. This old man is Fan Ming Yuan of the Seven Spirit Mountain. I've been waiting for you all here. Come. I'll let you all have a taste of the power of my devouring sword array. As Fan Ming Yuan spoke, his body rapidly expanded. In a flash of light, a pagoda about 2 to 3 feet tall gradually appeared. This pagoda had 7 floors, and each floor was filled with strange runes. The runes flashed with various colors, and a faint fluctuation slowly spread in all directions. In an instant, it had spread more than 100 feet and continued to spread in all directions. Devouring sword array. Hengju finally knew the name of the sword array that Qing Feng and the others couldn't resist. As he muttered, he looked at Xiong Huasong. Xiong Huasong was also puzzled. He didn't understand the origin of this array's name. Kill! Hengju thought for a while, then waved his hand. At the same time, he clapped his hand and held the talisman in his hand, waiting to use it at any time. It's finally time, Qing Feng said in a low voice. He pointed his finger, and a green ray of sword light flashed. It hit the swordsman at the bottom of the pagoda. Pa! There was an explosion. It wasn't clear whether the swordsman was killed by the sword qi or if he had received Qing Feng's order. His entire body suddenly exploded, turning into a ball of flesh and blood. Strangely, the flesh and blood didn't fall. Instead, as the sword light stirred, the flesh and blood gradually melted, turning into a ball of pure, dirty blood. The sword light seeped into the dirty blood and turned into sword threads. Then, Qing Feng's finger moved continuously, and the sword light kept falling. In an instant, except for Qing Feng, the dozens of swordsmen all disappeared, turning into a dozen balls of dirty blood. Kill! Although the cultivators felt their hair stand on end, they still shouted. Each of them activated their Dharma treasures and attacked Qing Feng and the others, hoping to kill them before this strange sword array was activated. Seeing the Dharma treasures flying towards him, a smile appeared on Qing Feng's bitter face. He actually began to chant, just like the Tao sect's incantations. As he chanted, the green sword light around Qing Feng's body became even brighter. Kick! The loud sound of a sword rang out again in the silent surroundings. The expressions of the group of Tao sect cultivators changed drastically like birds startled by the twang of a bow. Many cultivators hurriedly looked in the direction of the sword cry. Sure enough, there were some more sword lights that shot into the sky within a few kilometers of the sword cry. The spirit-devouring array had been formed. Quick! Just as everyone was distracted, Qing Feng stretched out his hand and a pitch-black sword pouch escaped from his robes. He threw his hand, and the sword pouch fell in midair. As Qing Feng chanted the incantation, a ray of sword light hit the sword pouch. Like a cultivator refining a Dharma treasure, the sword pouch emitted a green light. A faint sound came from the sword pouch. Explode. Qing Feng's eyes widened, and the sword light around his body became even brighter. Boom. From Qing Feng's feet, a ray of blood light appeared. This blood light quickly rolled, and in the blink of an eye, it wrapped around Qing Feng, turning him into a violently rolling ball of blood. Above the ball of blood, the green sword light was like lines of runes that constantly flowed on it. Occasionally, the sword light would seep into the ball of blood, appearing and disappearing. The yellow pagoda that seemed to have been forgotten by everyone suddenly let out a strange sound. An indescribable wave of energy enveloped these balls of blood. The sword light above the dozens of balls of blood let out a long cry at the same time. The green sword light suddenly rushed out, linked together, and flew towards the green light above the sword pouch. Wang Wang Wang. Following the sword light, the dozens of balls of blood smashed onto the sword pouch. The sword pouch became even more noisy, and it kept rolling as if something was anxious to come out. Boom! A loud sound came. It was Li Jijia's flying sword that hit the sword pouch. The blood light above the sword pouch had a deep hole. However, that hole did not expand with the flying sword. Instead, it rapidly shrunk, and the blood light even entangled Li Jijia's flying sword. Li Jijia frowned slightly. Just as he was about to put away the flying sword, another sound rang out. The entire sword pouch exploded, and hundreds or even thousands of fist-sized pitch-black flying objects flew out from within. These flying objects were in the shape of a flat gourd. The front half was a head, and the back half was a body. The head was the same size as the body, and there were two 2-inch-long wings on the body. When the flying objects rushed out of the sword pouch, the surrounding blood immediately rushed over and covered all of the flying objects. Wang! The blood landed on the flying objects and immediately seeped into them. The bodies of the hundreds of flying objects flashed with a pitch-black brilliance, as if they had eaten ferocious spiritual herbs. As the pitch-black brilliance flashed, the belly of the flying objects gradually became bigger, and the head gradually became smaller. In the end, the head was only the size of 2 fingertips. Li Jijia's flying sword had only been withdrawn from more than 5 feet. At this time, seeing the flying objects mutate, he formed a sword seal in his hand and stabbed towards the flying objects. The sword light was like lightning, and in an instant, it pierced the stomach of the flying objects. It looked like it was going to pierce through the flying objects. Unexpectedly, just as Li Jijia had absolute confidence, the flying object suddenly turned around. On its head, the eyes that had shrunk to the size of a mung bean flashed with a blood-red brilliance. It bit down on the flying sword. Li Jijia was dumbfounded. Crunch, crunch. The brilliance on the flying sword was actually swallowed by the flying objects. Chapter 2681. Buzz. While Li Jijia was still in shock, the remaining hundreds of flying creatures spread their wings and flew toward the dozens of golden core practitioners with bloodshot eyes. Spirit swallowing bug. Suddenly, Qi Ming, who was scolded by Dasun, screamed hysterically as if he had lost his parents. What? These are spirit-swallowing bugs? Heng Zhao and the others were shocked. Spirit-swallowing bugs were strange insects from antiquity times and ranked second in the insect scripture. They were the nemesis of Taoism practitioners. How could these golden core practitioners not have heard of them? However, they had only heard of them, and almost none of them had seen them before. Impossible! Xiong Huasong shouted, spirit-swallowing bugs are half the size of a fist, and their fangs are very long, and their wings are faintly golden. These are the larvae of spirit-swallowing bugs. I've seen them in a damaged insect scripture when I was young. It's definitely true. Qi Ming's face was pale and he could no longer maintain his composure. He said desperately, "Quick, let's run for our lives. Even if they are larvae, they are definitely not something we golden core practitioners can resist. To deal with spirit-swallowing bugs, we can only use heavenly thunder and other things that do not belong to the 5 elements. This is the sword tomb, where thunder does not exist. Even if there are masters from the thunder-controlling sect, it will be useless. Even all our spells will be swallowed by the spirit-swallowing bugs. And if we use spells without restraint, we will feed the spirit-swallowing bugs with spiritual chi and attract more spirit-swallowing bugs. Unless a nascent soul master is here and feeds the spirit-swallowing bugs with spiritual chi. Qi Ming had already escaped far away, but his words could still be heard. Li Jijie could not help but scream. His flying sword was the closest to the spirit-swallowing bugs, and there were already 3 of them on it. In just a few words, the spirit-swallowing bugs had already swallowed most of the sword light of the flying sword. The strangest thing was that the body of the flying sword did not change much, but there was no spiritual chi in it. It was no different from an ordinary piece of iron. This is LV Ruochang's killing move to kill us. Heng Zhao could not help but feel cold. He really did not expect LV Ruochang to be able to find hundreds of spirit-swallowing bugs. Even a golden core cultivator would not be able to escape from a dozen spirit-swallowing bugs. Let's go! Without hesitation, Heng Zhao hurriedly flew toward the gap between the spirit-swallowing bugs. Since Heng Heng had already fled, how could Da Sun and the others still remain in the air? Seeing the empty space, they prepared to flee. However, something happened that made Heng Zhao and the others' souls fly out of their bodies. The clumsy-looking spirit-swallowing bug flew very fast, like a dark light, and rushed to their front. He was not inferior to golden core cultivators like them. The strangest thing was that these hundreds of spirit-swallowing bugs did not fly to other Foundation establishment stage disciples at all. Instead, they stared at all the gold core stage cultivators. Even if a dozen spirit-swallowing bugs flew to other places and prepared to attack the Foundation establishment disciples, they only flew a few feet away and then quickly flew back. High up in the sky, the pagoda that the cultivators had overlooked was emitting a faint fluctuation. Spirit-swallowing bugs feed on the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. We are golden core cultivators, and our dantian contains the golden core, which is where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth is most concentrated. Isn't that the most delicious food in the eyes of the spirit-swallowing bugs? Qi Ming could not help but show off his knowledge, but he did not dare to stop at all. The golden core cultivators fled in panic. Although the Foundation establishment stage disciples did not have to worry for the time being, how could they remain calm? Although most of them still maintained their formation, as a whole, they seemed to be in a state of complete defeat as they flew towards the west in a sorry state. But at this moment, 3 black lines suddenly streaked across the sky and landed right next to Qi Ming, blocking him in the middle. How is this possible? Qi Ming almost rubbed his eyes. These are just the larvae of the spirit-swallowing bugs. How do they know how to surround us? But how could the spirit-swallowing bugs answer his question? Before Qi Ming could fly again, the 3 spirit-swallowing bugs flew at the same time, and the black lines flashed and landed on Qi Ming's body. Oh no, Qi Ming was actually not slow, but he was actually surrounded by 3 spirit-swallowing bugs. He was really unlucky. Although Qi Ming did not dare to use powerful spells at this moment, he did not hesitate to wave his hand and cast a Dharma incantation on the spirit-swallowing bugs. This golden core cultivator's confinement spell was very powerful. The spiritual chi within a foot of the spirit-swallowing bugs was slightly stagnant. The spirit-swallowing bugs opened their mouths slightly, and the fangs at the corners of their mouths that were not very sharp bit on the confinement spell. Immediately, the confinement spell was broken. Although Qi Ming was already mentally prepared, when he saw that the confinement spell was broken so easily by a flying bug, his expression changed instantly. However, before he could think further, the 2 spirit-swallowing bugs on his left and right had already begun to devour his protective light. Qi Ming continuously cast Dharma incantations, wanting to block the spirit-swallowing bugs. Unfortunately, before he could cast a Dharma incantation, his Dharma incantation was quickly devoured by the spirit-swallowing bugs and could only delay them a little. It's good that you can delay them. Qi Ming was slightly relieved. He hurriedly checked, wanting to escape from the siege of the 3 spirit-swallowing bugs again. Just as Qi Ming was checking, another black line flew quickly and quietly from behind him. Before he could react, it landed on his protective light. Creak! Creak! The spirit-swallowing bugs unceremoniously began to devour Qi Ming's protective golden light, which immediately began to flicker. Damn it! Qi Ming turned pale with fright. He clapped his hands, and a palm-sized scarf flew out from his storage bag. The scarf emitted a pink light, and after absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, it rapidly expanded and covered the spirit-swallowing bugs behind Qi Ming. Creak! A soft sound, which seemed to be made by the spirit-swallowing bugs, was immediately covered by the pink light. Thank goodness! Qi Ming had just heaved a sigh of relief when 4 more black lines flew quickly from elsewhere. Obviously, they were attracted by the pink light. Damn it! How could I forget? Qi Ming almost wanted to slap himself. The spirit-swallowing bugs like the light from the Dharma treasure. I clearly knew that, and I even reminded others. How could I be so foolish? Why did I release the Dharma treasure? One of the spirit-swallowing bugs landed on the Dharma treasure and devoured the light. The other 3 spirit-swallowing bugs rushed toward Qi Ming. Facing 6 spirit-swallowing bugs at once, Qi Ming was very flustered. He cast spells one after another. What made him feel cold was that the spirit-swallowing bug's speed of devouring spells was getting faster and faster. His confinement spell was almost instantly devoured by the spirit-swallowing bugs. I can't care anymore. Qi Ming saw that his scarf was about to be torn apart by 2 spirit-swallowing bugs. He gritted his teeth and rubbed his hands together. The Dharma power in his body surged, and a violent wave of Dharma power was generated from his hands. Kill! Qi Ming shouted and released his hands. With a roar, a bright light overflowed and covered the surrounding dozens of feet. A strong Dharma power rushed toward the 6 spirit-swallowing bugs. Chirp chirp, the 6 spirit-swallowing bugs cried out loudly as they were sent flying by Qi Ming's attack. They tumbled in the air. However, when the 6 spirit-swallowing bugs stopped in midair, they cried out and rushed toward Qi Ming again. It was as if the spell just now had no effect on them. Moreover, because of the light from Qi Ming's spell, another 3 spirit-swallowing bugs were attracted to him. This! Qi Ming almost cried. Then he realized something. It must be Green Peak. What secret skill did he use? Let's go! Qi Ming hurriedly moved his body, wanting to escape. He had only flown 2 feet when the 9 spirit-swallowing bugs surrounded him. Even the 2 spirit-swallowing bugs that had devoured the scarf stuck their heads out of the scarf that had lost its light. They flapped their wings and flew toward Qi Ming. Qi Ming was anxious. He knew better than anyone how powerful the spirit-swallowing bugs were. However, he was the first to encounter so many spirit-swallowing bugs. He took out all kinds of yellow talismans and magic weapons from his storage bag and threw them at the spirit-swallowing bugs one by one, hoping for a miracle. However, none of these magic weapons that could control the spiritual qi of heaven and earth gave Qi Ming any hope. Qi Ming screamed. Just as the light around him flashed again and sent the 9 spirit-swallowing bugs flying, 2 of them actually got close to his protective light. They bit through Qi Ming's protective light and crashed into his body. Qi Ming's screams attracted the attention of many Golden Core practitioners who were fighting the spirit-swallowing bugs. They also attracted the attention of many Foundation establishment practitioners. The 9 spirit-swallowing bugs that had been sent flying by Qi Ming flapped their wings again and rushed toward Qi Ming. One of them was even attracted by the light from his spell and flew toward him. These 10 spirit-swallowing bugs all rushed toward Qi Ming's lower abdomen. His body was like a piece of paper and was easily penetrated by them. Qi Ming writhed madly in the air. He was in so much pain. Explode! Unable to bear the pain, Qi Ming made a spell and wanted to explode himself. However, when he made the spell, no Dharma power was produced in his meridians. The spirit-swallowing bugs had already rushed into his dantian and swallowed his golden core. At this moment, Qi Ming's Dharma power could no longer support the flying spell. His body fell from the sky and landed on the ground of the sword catacomb, a bloody mess. Buzz, from his flesh, the spirit-swallowing bugs that were smaller than before flew out again. They were much faster and flew toward the other Golden Core practitioners. The Foundation establishment and Golden Core practitioners who had witnessed this scene all turned pale. A practitioner in the early stage of the Golden Core realm, who was already famous on the Dawn Rain continent, was killed by a dozen little bugs. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, how could they have believed it? When, at this moment, the sword hums that seemed to have subsided earlier once again rang out loudly. Amidst the sword lights of the cultivators several kilometers away, many swordsmen wearing pitch-black sword robes appeared. These swordsmen's heads and faces were all covered. Chapter 2682. These swordsmen stood on the sword lights and flew high into the sky. Their eyes looked at the 160,000 cultivators who were fleeing in panic. They took out a flat object from their bosom and put it in their mouths. Then, they took out a pitch-black bag from their waist and opened it. A bunch of pitch-black flying objects also rushed out from the bag. The flying objects were the size of a fist and were in the shape of a gourd. They looked exactly like the spirit-swallowing bugs. These swordsmen puffed up their cheeks and seemed to be blowing sounds that couldn't be heard by human ears. Along with the sounds, the spirit-swallowing bugs flew in the air, covering the sky and the earth, and rushed toward the cultivators in a dense and overwhelming manner. Ah? So many spirit-swallowing bugs? Seeing so many spirit-swallowing bugs flying towards them, the cultivators of the True Path sect were scared out of their wits. They could not care less about their formation. They all covered their heads and ran away, afraid that the spirit-swallowing bugs would target them. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Within a few miles, the sound of the spirit-swallowing bugs spreading their wings could be heard. The entire battlefield was covered. Hold on, hold on. Li Zongbao flew in the air and shouted with all his might. However, the cultivators were already frightened by the spirit-swallowing bugs. How could they hold on? Senior brother Li, watch out. Xiao Mao shouted. A spirit-swallowing bug flew to Li Zongbao's back and rushed towards him. Although Li Zongbao was shocked, he still waved the immortal piercing whip in his hand and hit the spirit-swallowing bug. Senior brother, don't use your magic treasure. Fairy Hong Xia was also shocked and shouted hurriedly. However, to their surprise, Li Zongbao's whip hit the spirit-swallowing bug and sent it flying back dozens of feet. It fell from the air and was dead. But this doesn't seem to be a spirit-swallowing bug. Xiao Mao was also slightly shocked and hurriedly flew over. When he caught the spirit-swallowing bug with his hand, he saw that this spirit-swallowing bug was very similar to the previous one. However, there was a deep dent on its thumb-sized head. It must have been caused by Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip. This spirit-swallowing bug. Fairy Hong Xia quickly flew over and took a closer look. She could not tell. Fairy Hong Xia had never seen an earth-devouring bug before. Naturally, she did not know that the earth-devouring bug was no different from the spirit-devouring bug. Humph, of course they are not spirit-swallowing bugs. Li Zongbao's voice came from behind them. If the sky is filled with spirit-swallowing bugs, why would the swordsmen of the Huan Kingdom use so many sword formations? Just this spirit-devouring array alone killed hundreds of thousands of people from my Dao sect. Indeed, Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Mao raised their heads and looked over. Although most of the spirit-devouring bugs flew towards the true Dao sect disciples, some of them left the group and pounced towards the ground. There was some vegetation on the ground, as well as some gravel. Creaking sounds could be heard as the gravel and vegetation gradually disappeared. Many spirit-swallowing bugs even pounced on some of the fallen celestial devices and magic treasures. However, these spirit-swallowing bugs were different from before. They swallowed the celestial devices bit by bit, and all the celestial devices and magic treasures were damaged. This is not a spirit-swallowing bug, but it is similar to the spirit-swallowing bug. Fairy Hong Xia understood immediately. It must be that the swordsmen of the Huan Kingdom tried to cultivate the spirit-swallowing bugs but failed. Instead, they mutated. Those that devour gravel are probably earth-swallowing bugs. those that devour vegetation are wood-swallowing bugs, and those that devour celestial devices must be gold-swallowing bugs. That's right. There are also water-swallowing bugs and fire-swallowing bugs. Now they are all here to join in the fun. Let's kill them all. Xiao Mao also shouted. He stretched out his hand and took out the magic treasures that he did not dare to use. However, at this moment, another scream came from afar. Another early golden elixir realm cultivator had his body broken through by the spirit-swallowing bugs and rushed into his body. This swordsman is really cunning, Fairy Hong Xia said angrily. They used hundreds of real spirit-swallowing bugs to kill them, and tens of thousands of fake spirit-swallowing bugs as a smokescreen. Between the real and fake, who knows which is real and which is fake? Who cares if they are real or fake? Let's kill them first. Li Zongbao sneered. He waved his immortal piercing whip and chased after the spirit-swallowing bugs, killing them one by one. However, Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and Fairy Hong Xia were too weak. They only killed less than 30 fake spirit-swallowing bugs in 10 minutes. The other cultivators were fleeing in panic. Who would notice their actions? Li Zongbao was very familiar with this scream. He hurriedly looked up and saw that Li Jijie of the Changbai sect was covered in blood. Finally, he could not resist the attack of the spirit-swallowing bugs and they rushed into his body. His corpse fell from the sky. Alas, Li Zongbao was silent. He knew that Li Jijie's flying sword was targeted by the spirit-swallowing bugs first. It was already good that he could hold on for so long. Unfortunately, he was a middle golden elixir realm cultivator of the Changbai sect and could not escape from being killed by the spirit-swallowing bugs. Before he died, he did not even have time to use the talisman given by his sect. Li Jijie is dead. Are the other middle golden elixir realm masters far away? Li Zongbao looked around, looking for his master. In the distance, Hung Feng was also entangled by about 10 spirit-swallowing bugs. Hung Feng was afraid of attracting more spirit-swallowing bugs, so he did not dare to use magic. He only dared to move in the air. When he could not dodge, he dared to use his magic power. It seemed that they were of one mind. When Li Zongbao looked up, Hung Feng also turned his head. When he saw Li Zongbao's gaze, he immediately waved his hand and pointed to the west. The meaning was very clear. He wanted Li Zongbao to escape. But how could Li Zongbao leave? He moved his body and was about to fly over with the immortal piercing whip. Hung Feng was furious. He was careless and a spirit-swallowing bug almost rushed into his protective brilliance. Senior brother Li, Fairy Hong Xia said anxiously, even if you go over, I'm afraid you are no match for him. You will attract the spirit-swallowing bugs for no reason. Li Zongbao wanted to say, if Xiao Hua is there, what will you do? However, just as he said those two words, he heard a loud sword hum coming from the eastern horizon. A huge sword like a phoenix appeared in the air. Lu, Rua, Chang. Li Zongbao said word by word. What killing move does she have now? Fairy Hong Xia's expression changed. At this moment, 3 spirit-swallowing bugs flew towards the 3 of them, in the distance, in the direction that the Dao sect disciples had scattered and wanted to charge towards, which was 2 miles away. The faint smoke and dust was extremely dense. It was as if the smoke and dust that had covered dozens of miles had originated from this place. When Lu Ruochang's huge sword appeared in the air, a blurry figure appeared from the smoke. It was the first person that Lu Ruochang encountered when she entered the 4-square sword formation, Night Rain, who was wearing a black sword formation. Night Rain was the same as before. His entire body was hidden in his sword armor. Only a pair of eyes could see outside. The rest of his body was not exposed. No one knew what he looked like. Lu Ruochang's phoenix sword essence was reflected in his eyes. It was a kind of eagerness. Night Rain stretched out his hand and took out a strange object. This object was like a statue. It was the size of a palm and was dark green. It looked very similar to the palace guarding bug. It had a triangular head, a small body, and a thumb-length tail. However, this object had 5 legs, which was different from the palace guarding bug's 4 legs. On its head, there was only 1 eye, which took up more than 60% of its head. Yiyu took out the object and began to chant in a low voice. The strange syllables were emitted in an extremely rhythmic manner. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the object actually reacted. Its entire body emitted a faintly discernible green light. This green light had an extremely strong penetrative power. It even clearly illuminated the dense fog around Yiyu. Seeing that the object was glowing, Night Rain stretched out her thumb and placed it in her mouth. She bit it lightly and blood oozed out from the pad of her thumb. Night Rain raised her thumb and looked at the blood that was slowly flowing out. Her chanting changed again. The sound seemed to have landed on the blood. The blood that oozed out did not coagulate. Instead, it slowly flowed on Night Rain's thumb. Gradually, a blood-red-green seal script appeared on the pad of his thumb. This green seal character was so exquisite and so strange. The thick fog around him actually surged with the appearance of the green seal character like boiling water. A small character could actually have such power. If others were here, they would definitely be shocked. However, Night Rain seemed to be used to this. His eyes were abnormally calm, without any ripples. Poof! Seeing that the green seal character was formed and was about to fly out of his hand, Night Rain did not hesitate to open his mouth and spit a mouthful of essence blood on it. Night Rain's essence blood was originally a cluster, and the green seal character was extremely small. However, when the essence blood rushed out, the green seal character flashed a faint green light. All the essence blood landed on it. Even a faint shadow fell with the essence blood. As the green light flashed, it was pulled out of Night Rain's mouth. Moo, it sounded like the moo of a cow. Just as the shadow fell into the green seal text, the green seal text suddenly made a sound. Night Rain's hand trembled slightly. It was as if the character suddenly became much heavier. Go! Night Rain did not dare to delay. His eyes were filled with anxiety. He flipped his hand and pressed his thumb on the object in the shape of the palace guardian bug with great difficulty. The green seal character formed by the blood landed on the object's eye. Whoosh! As the green seal character landed on the object's eye, the palace guardian bug's eye suddenly opened. A cruel, bloody, and merciless green light swept out and rushed into the fog. Night Rain's face was extremely pale. His body was also trembling. As the palace guardian bug opened its eye, a green light appeared on its body. The palace guardian bug slowly floated in the air. Chapter 2683. Phew! Night Rain let out a long breath again. Then she waved her hand, and several faint green lights shot out, hitting the air about 100 feet away. The thick fog was slowly lifted as the green lights hit it, as if a layer of gauze was being removed. Under the thin veil, there were 4 groups of sword cultivator disciples. These 4 groups of sword cultivator disciples were all dressed in different sword attire. They were scattered near Yiyu, and each group had over 10,000 people. They surrounded Yiyu. Fellow swordsman Knight. After the thick fog was lifted, a first-grade illusory swordsman standing in front of each group saw Night Rain. He hurriedly flew up and bowed, saying, "It's time for us to contribute to the sword realm, isn't it?" "That's right." Night Rain nodded slightly, but her voice was weak. She said lightly, "Fellow Taoists from the Sword School of Sword Mountain, the Pingli Sword School, the Flowing Wind Sword Village and the Flying Thunder Sword Sect, you've been lying in ambush here for nearly 5 years, so you're very familiar with the cooperation of this sword formation. Now LV Genyu has sent a signal, and hundreds of thousands of practitioners from the Taoist sect have fallen into the spirit-devouring formation. Needless to say, the gold core practitioners in the formation have been attacked by the spirit-devouring bugs, so they have no time to take care of the foundation establishment and chi-refining disciples. Those disciples have been confused by LV Genyo's deceptive tactic and have been utterly defeated. Now is the time for us to contribute to the sword realm." The leaders of the 4-sword school were 2 men and 2 women. Hearing Night Rain's words, they were excited. Ji Ping, a gray-haired swordsman, bowed and said, "The Sword School of Sword Mountain is a small sect in the sword realm. Under the leadership of fellow swordsman Night Rain, we're able to come out for the sword realm and make such a great contribution. On behalf of more than 10,000 disciples of the Sword School of Sword Mountain, I'd like to thank fellow swordsman Knight Rain. If fellow swordsman Knight Rain needs any help in the future, we'll do anything for you. That's right, Li Moji of the Pingli Sword School, a middle-aged swordswoman, also smiled and said, according to LV Genyu, it's because of fellow swordsman Knight Rain that we have the opportunity to contribute to the sword realm. We're all very grateful to fellow swordsman Knight Rain. It's fine. We are all disciples of the sword domain. If we can do something for the sword domain, so what if we die? Yu said with a faint smile. Flowing Wind Sword Manner's Fan Ping became even more charming. She smiled and said, it's a pity that we've been training with sword friend Knight Rain for 5 years, but we've never seen his true face. It's really a pity. There will be opportunities in the future. Our 4 sects only need to remember Knight Rain's sword friend's kindness. Flying Thunder Sword Sect's Huang Xing was a tall old man. His voice was also extremely loud. Hee, my grace, you will naturally know in the future. Yi Yu's voice grew louder and louder. He waved his hand and said, now, my 4 friends, get ready. Tell your disciples to follow the previous formation and prepare to activate the sword origin. But the 4 of them shouted in unison. They were all abnormally excited. Yes, they were able to participate in the ambush of the 4 directions sword formation with the help of the sword formation. They did not need to fight the Taoist cultivators head-on. This was simply a naked military merit. Needless to say, the Yin-Yang sword formation and the 5-element sword formation, the disciples of the Kuan sword sect and the Taiha sword sect practiced the Yin-Yang flying sword. They were the best choice to set up the Yin-Yang sword formation. The 3 Swords sect and the Cauldron Sword sect could also gather the 5 elements flying sword. However, in the sword domain, how could these 2 sects be the only ones who could gather the 5 elements flying sword? The reason why the 2 sword sects were included in the 4 directions sword formation was that they had a good relationship with the Black Phoenix sword sect. As for the Duanshui Villa in the Spirit Devouring formation, they were LV Ruochang's own subordinates. Everyone knew that the last formation was to deal with the cultivators who had escaped from the Spirit Devouring formation. Many swordsmen did not believe that those gold core cultivators could escape from the siege of thousands of Spirit Devouring bugs. The last formation would definitely kill the most enemies among the 4 sword formations, which meant that it would have the greatest military merit. The masters of the 4 sects had never thought that such a good job would fall on them. After all, they were already the second-rate sword sects in the sword domain, even though they had once been glorious. However, because of the arrangement of this mysterious Yu, the 4 sword sects were selected. The masters of the 4 sects were overjoyed and immediately sent out tens of thousands of elites to cooperate with Yu's arrangement. They trained for 5 years. For such a reason, how could Ji Ping and the others not be grateful to Yu? These words were really from the bottom of their hearts. When they heard Knight Rain's orders, the 4 of them shouted loudly and flew into the air above their respective sword faction disciples. With a wave of their hands, sword beams shot into the sky. The nearly 40,000 disciples emitted a faint sword beam as their figures gradually moved. It seemed to be an extremely mysterious trajectory. The 40,000 disciples guarded the surroundings of Knight Rain, and each disciple moved within a certain range. 10 disciples formed a group and formed a trajectory. 100 disciples, 1,000 disciples, and even 10,000 disciples from each sect formed a trajectory. The 40,000 disciples moved around Yu at the same time. As the entire formation rotated, a strange suction force appeared above each disciple's head. Yu's eyes flashed with intense passion. He pointed at the Palace Guardian insect that stopped in the air. The Palace Guardian insect's body shone brightly and it strangely moved in the air like a real Palace Guardian insect. Seeing the Palace Guardian insect crawl to the top of Yu's head, Yu suddenly raised his head and opened his mouth. A faint green light shot into the air like a sharp sword and rushed into the Palace Guardian insect's body. Gee! The Palace Guardian insect cried out in alarm. Its one eye shot out tens of thousands of green light beams into the sky like a fountain. Then it scattered back down. The place where the green light landed was where the suction force came from. It was the top of each disciple's head. Kill! Yi Yu roared. The sword light around the 40,000 disciples flashed. The sword origin in their bodies was ready to come out. However, just as the sword origin was about to leave him, the green light beams immediately penetrated the disciples' heads. Every disciple's body was immediately covered by a layer of green light. The sword origin was immediately imprisoned in the disciples' bodies. Ping-ping-ping. A series of light explosions rang out continuously, lasting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Every light explosion was a disciple's sword origin surging and his body exploding. After every light explosion, the green light entered his flesh and merged with his sword origin. Sword friendy, what is going on? Ji Ping and the others were shocked and hurriedly shouted. Yi Yu raised his head and laughed happily. He said, "Didn't you all want to contribute to Sword Realm? Weren't you all not afraid of being crushed? Now is the time for you all to sacrifice your lives for Sword Realm." But, Ji Ping was at a loss for words. He didn't know how to ask. Who are you? Why do you have to choose our four-sword sects? Li Moji and Fan Ping, the two swordsmen, were the most meticulous. They almost shouted in unison. At this moment, Ji Ping and the others suddenly understood that the fourth sword formation of the four-sword formation was definitely not an ordinary sword formation. It was definitely an extremely sinister sword formation. Looking at the stance of their disciples, it was most likely a sinister sword formation that would exchange their lives for theirs. It was Yi Yu, a mysterious person that they had never seen before, who sent the 40,000 disciples of the four sects into this pit of fire. However, why would this mysterious Yi Yu treat the disciples of the four sects like this? Could it be that the four sects also had a grudge against him? In the blink of an eye, Ji Ping and the others had racked their brains countless times. It was as if they had racked their brains but still couldn't find a swordsman who had such a deep grudge against their sword sect. Haha, didn't you all say that you wanted to see my true appearance? Yi Yu laughed loudly. He stretched out his hand and pulled down his sword armor. He said, "I will now fulfill your last wish." Under the sword armor was an extremely handsome man. His eyebrows were sword-like and his nose was like a hanging gallbladder. He didn't seem to have any special features. Ji Ping and the others looked at him again and again. They couldn't remember anything at all. They couldn't help but smile bitterly at each other. "What? Can't you see who I am?" Yi Yu's eyes were filled with eagerness. His tone was much more cheerful than before. Ji Ping and the others smiled bitterly and then sneered, "I don't care what grudges you have with our four sections." However, you used the excuse of setting up the sword formation to avenge your personal grudge. You are the one that we hate the most in the battle of Sword Domain. Today we will fight to the death with you. We don't believe that the four illusory swordsmen can't escape from your hands. When we have a chance to live, we will find Lu Ruochang and Lu Jianyu and ask her to uphold justice for us. Seeing that the four illusory swordsmen were overflowing with sword light, the flying swords in their bodies were about to fly out. Yi Yu gently pointed his hand. Four green rays of light fell from the top of the four people's heads. The green threads that were connected to their heads trembled rapidly. The four people's bodies were completely imprisoned by the green light, unable to move at all. Lu Jianyu? Are you still fantasizing about finding Lu Ruochang? How can this Yi let you all return alive? Yi Yu said cheerfully. Besides, even if you survive, even if people suspect that more than 40,000 people from your four sects died, will Lu Ruochang blame me? What? Ji Ping and the others struggled with all their might. However, their sword origin was completely imprisoned by the green light. They couldn't move at all. They couldn't help but despair in their hearts. When they heard Yi Yu's words, they were immediately shocked. The feeling of being toyed with filled their hearts uncontrollably. You have colluded with Lu Ruochang? Fan Ping couldn't help but cry out. What do you mean by colluding? Yi Yu sneered. This is the promise that Lu Jianyu gave me. It is also the price for me to kill hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators. Using 40,000 disciples of your four-sword sect to exchange for the lives of hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators, Don't you think it's an extremely good deal? Chapter 2684. Shut up. Huang Xing said angrily, since you think it's worth it, why don't you let your sword's gate come here to die? Yi Yu's face twitched slightly, but there was a trace of reluctance in his eyes. He said faintly, yes, you all said that you could give up your lives for the sword domain, but now that it's come to this, you all go back on your words. We'd rather do that, but we don't want to die in your hands for no reason. Huang Xing shouted. However, Yi Yu ignored him and only muttered, as long as you're a human, regardless of whether you're a cultivator or a swordsman, you all have the desire to live. However, some people don't want this chance to live and choose death for the sake of others. But what about the others? They're not grateful to these people, and after making use of them, they wantonly killed their descendants. The heavenly Tao is fair. What are you talking about? Li Moji saw Yi Yu's crazy look and was very scared. He said anxiously, 40,000 of our sword's gate disciples have already fallen, do you still want to live? Yi Yu looked up at the four of them and sneered, not just you, the foundations of your sword's gate in the sword domain, after the battle here, I'll kill you all. This is something that LV Ruochang has already agreed to. Only by completely wiping out all four of your clans will I be able to reveal my true face in broad daylight. Why do you have such a deep hatred for our sword's gate? Ji Ping's face twitched. Before death, the desire to know the answer was incomparably huge. Didn't you just say it? You want my sword's gate to come here to die. Yi Yu said faintly, my sword's gate has already done it 8,000 years ago. 8,000 years? Ji Ping was stunned, as if he couldn't remember anything. You're a remnant of the Flying Dragon Sword Gate? Huang Xing suddenly remembered something and exclaimed. Ha! Not bad, there's actually someone who knows about my Flying Dragon Sword Gate. Yi Yu waved his hand, and an orange-yellow sword light soared into the sky. With a roar, a dragon-shaped sword intent flashed out from the sword light, and an enormous and indescribable aura spread out from the dragon-shaped sword, enveloping an area of several hundred feet. Flying Dragon Sword Sect? It really is the Flying Dragon Sword Sect. Ji Ping muttered in a daze. That's right. Since you know that I am a disciple of the Flying Dragon Sword Sect, you should know why I am here, right? Yi Yu said coldly, 8,000 years ago, your four sects took advantage of the fact that my Flying Dragon Sword Sect's vitality was greatly damaged to invade my dragon platform and exterminate my descendants. Tell me, should I not take revenge today? Sword friend Yi. Huang Xing said helplessly, that was 8,000 years ago. What does it have to do with us? It's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. You've killed tens of thousands of disciples from our four sects, so you should have avenged your Flying Dragon Sword Sect, right? The four of us don't plan on going back alive. The other disciples of our four sects are even more innocent. Thousands of years ago, the disciples of my Flying Dragon Sword Sect who were stationed at the dragon platform were not innocent. When your four sects annihilated my Flying Dragon Sword Sect that day, did you ever consider that you were innocent? Yi Yu said coldly, now you're just complaining. How can you be innocent? Furthermore, the Sword Region Dragon platform belongs to my Flying Dragon Sword Sect. You've occupied it for thousands of years. Shouldn't you leave? Shouldn't you pay the price? Yi Yu lifted his eyes to look towards the east as he spoke. The sounds of fighting were already faintly discernible. He snorted from his nose and said, this Yi is too lazy to say anything more to all of you. This Yi is only telling all of you this because all of you have been so respectful towards this Yi over the past 5 years. All of you should hurry over. The credit of killing hundreds of thousands of Tao sect disciples is waiting for this Yi to share with everyone. Following that, Yi Yu raised his hand and the four of them were surrounded by a green light. The four of them didn't even have time to make a sound before they turned into bloodstains. These 4 bloodstains were the same as the other 40,000 bloodstains. Although they no longer had any vitality, they were still spinning like before. Rise! Yi Yu roared. He opened his mouth and a faint green light was shot at the palace guarding bug. The palace guarding bug moved slightly, and the tens of thousands of green threads trembled at the same time. Phantoms emerged from the bloodstains. They were the vengeful spirits of the 40,000 swordsmen from the four sects. Once these vengeful spirits were drawn out, a vicious aura immediately rushed out. This vicious aura gathered together and even dispersed the thick fog. Ha! Yu laughed. He pointed his hand and the tens of thousands of green threads flew out and landed on the tens of thousands of blood stains. The blood stains boiled and countless bubbles emerged from the blood stains. Streaks of bloody light followed the green threads and rushed into the palace guarding bug. The blood stains quickly shrank. Soon, all of the blood stains disappeared. The palace guarding bug became half the size of a person and its body emitted a red and dark green light. Sweet. The palace guarding bug raised its head and made a sound. The sound was not right, but the invisible wave spread far away. As the wave swept across, the vengeful spirits slowly rushed out from the ground of the sword tomb one after another. Go! Yu flew up and landed on the palace guarding insect's body. The palace guarding insect carried Yu and quickly crawled through the air. Tens of thousands of vengeful spirits surged toward the east like a tide, which was where the Dao sect cultivators were charging from. Within a radius of several miles around Yu, even more vengeful spirits surged forth like a thin tide and gathered toward the battlefield. On the battlefield, 3 spirit-swallowing bugs quietly turned into 3 black lines and rushed to the left of Li Zongbao and the others. Li Zongbao and the others had already noticed it. Humph! Li Zongbao sneered. He waved his hand and the immortal piercing whip hit the spirit-swallowing bugs again. But something unexpected happened. This time, the spirit-swallowing bugs were not knocked away like before. Instead, they opened their mouths and bit the light of the immortal piercing whip and started to chew it. Spirit-swallowing bugs. Li Zongbao was shocked. He hurriedly activated his Dharma power and the light of the immortal piercing whip shone brightly. He wanted to knock the spirit-swallowing bugs away. But as soon as he moved, the 2 spirit-swallowing bugs that were flying toward Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia were immediately attracted by the light of the immortal piercing whip and rushed toward Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao hurriedly activated his flying skill to escape, but he was not as fast as the spirit-swallowing bugs. In a moment, 2 spirit-swallowing bugs caught up with him and bit the light of the immortal piercing whip. What should I do now? Li Zongbao had always treated the immortal piercing whip as his treasure. When he saw the 3 spirit-swallowing bugs devouring the light of the whip, he knew that in a moment his whip would be turned into ordinary iron like Li Jijie's flying sword. He was extremely anxious. At this time, Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao also flew over. Although they did not dare to get too close, they were not too far away. But they were helpless when they saw the 3 spirit-swallowing bugs. Should we use the congenital primordial water? Fairy Hongxia hesitated and gritted her teeth. However, the congenital primordial water was activated by the Ice Phoenix celestial body. Although the celestial body did not need to be released, the fluctuation of the celestial body, was it spiritual energy? Fairy Hongxia could not be sure. Moreover, the celestial body was more than 100 feet long. It was far more attractive to the spirit-swallowing bugs than ordinary cultivators. Fairy Hongxia was afraid that she would become the target of the spirit-swallowing bugs the moment she released the Ice Phoenix celestial body. The consequences would be worse than Li Zongbao losing the immortal piercing whip. Li Zongbao helplessly used his Dharma incantation, such as the fireball skill and the confinement skill, one after another. Unfortunately, none of them were effective. The light of the immortal piercing whip gradually disappeared in the mouths of the spirit-swallowing bugs. Forget it. Li Zongbao shook his hand and was about to throw away the immortal piercing whip. But at this time, the spirit-swallowing bugs flew up again and headed for Li Zongbao's arm. Obviously, they had followed the trajectory of Li Zongbao's Dharma power. Oh no! Li Zongbao also saw Qi Ming and Li Jijie being killed. How could he not know the power of the spirit-swallowing bugs? He hurriedly flew up. Just as before, Li Zongbao had only flown a few feet when the spirit-swallowing bugs were already behind him. Li Zongbao trembled with fear and could only activate the Dharma power in his body, regardless of whether it would attract more spirit-swallowing bugs. At this critical moment, there was a loud buzzing sound. In the sky, about 1,000 feet behind Heng Heng, a faint light flashed. Dozens of strong hurricanes appeared and a huge palm gradually formed. It was unknown which middle-stage gold core cultivator could not resist the attack of the spirit-swallowing bugs and could not help but use the talisman given by his sect. The hand of the nascent soul had already been activated. The powerful confinement skill firmly held the dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs surrounding the cultivator. However, many of the spirit-swallowing bugs around the cultivator were attracted by the spiritual power of the talisman. They abandoned their targets and flew toward the hand of the nascent soul. The 3 spirit-swallowing bugs on Li Zongbao's back were also attracted by the talisman. They turned their heads and flew toward the hand of the nascent soul, ignoring Li Zongbao. I was lucky. Li Zongbao's back was sweating. He could not help but whisper. He lowered his head and looked at the immortal piercing whip in his hand, which had lost its brilliance. He regretfully and reluctantly put it into his storage bag. Oh no, it's Uncle Liang Mingfu from the Nanming sect. Fairy Hong Xia's eyes were sharp. She had already seen the gold core cultivator using the hand of the nascent soul. She could not help but cry out. Sure enough, Liang Mingfu made an incantation. The hand of the nascent soul clenched fiercely. When the hand opened, the dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs that were caught fell from the sky. However, after falling for a few feet, 2 or 3 of them flapped their wings and flew up again. The other 10 spirit-swallowing bugs fell with the wind and did not fly up again. Seeing this, Liang Mingfu's face lit up. However, his joy only flashed for a moment before it froze on his face. Within 100 feet, dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs were attracted by the spiritual chi of the nascent soul's talisman. They flew toward the hand. Chapter 2685. Damn it! Liang Mingfu shouted and was about to cast another spell. But at this time, the dozens of black lines had flown to the big hand, and dozens of black spots appeared on the big hand like spots. Seal! Liang Mingfu dared not hesitate. His Dharma power surged, and the big hand emitted a faint light again, driving all the spirit-swallowing bugs away from the big hand. When Liang Mingfu was about to control the big hand to catch the spirit-swallowing bugs, they opened their sharp teeth again and started to chew the light of the Yuan Ying's hand. You're courting death! Liang Mingfu snorted and slowly grabbed the spirit-swallowing bugs with his big hand again. Uncle Liang, watch out! Li Zongbao's voice was very loud. Liang Mingfu was in danger and hurriedly released his divine thought. Sure enough, just behind him, dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs scattered and flew towards him. At this time, they were less than 3 feet away from him. How can these spirit-swallowing bugs be so cunning? Liang Mingfu was shocked. He moved quickly and the Yuan Ying's hand smashed towards the spirit-swallowing bugs again. Buzz, the spirit-swallowing bugs were almost unable to move under the restriction of the Yuan Ying's hand. Suddenly, the big hand made a deafening sound. Damn it! Liang Mingfu heard it and his face changed greatly. Before he could do anything, boom, with another loud sound, the Yuan Ying's hand suddenly collapsed in the air and turned into a broken talisman again, falling slowly. The spirit-swallowing bugs that had swallowed the Yuan Ying's hand swarmed towards Liang Mingfu like a swarm of bees. Run! Liang Mingfu only had one thought in his mind, and his body suddenly swayed. Just as Liang Mingfu flew several meters away, a spirit-swallowing bug strangely rushed towards him from the side. Liang Mingfu waved his hand, and 2 more spirit-swallowing bugs appeared on his left side. Liang Mingfu's heart sank. When he just raised his other hand, buzz, as if thousands of bees were dancing around his ears, Liang Mingfu was very anxious. He scanned with his divine thought and his face turned pale. He saw that the dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs had already landed on his back and were devouring his protective golden light. Oh no! Without hesitation, Liang Mingfu made a prompt decision to cast an incantation before the protective golden light was extinguished. Boom! With a loud bang, the space within a radius of hundreds of feet shook violently. Countless airwaves rushed in all directions from here, and the dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs were also pushed more than 1,000 feet away. That was not all. Within 100 zhang of Liang Mingfu, there were several golden core cultivators and quite a few foundation establishment disciples. The golden core cultivators were still able to escape in a panic, but the foundation establishment disciples were miserable. Although they tried their best to escape, they were still unable to escape the impact of the golden core explosion. Most of them died. The pitiful thing was that instead of dying in the mouth of the spirit-swallowing bugs, they were dragged to the grave by their own teachers. For a moment, the area within 1,000 feet of where Liang Mingfu had exploded was completely empty. How terrifying! Xiao Mao exclaimed in shock when he saw how powerful Liang Mingfu's self-destruction was. Li Zongbao, Fairy Hong Xia, and Xiao Mao were originally quite a distance away from Liang Mingfu. After Liang Mingfu flew in the opposite direction, they were at the edge of the 1,000 feet radius. When Liang Mingfu self-destructed, they hurriedly dodged and did not suffer much damage. That's amazing. Unlike Xiao Mao, Fairy Hong Xia saw that after Liang Mingfu's self-destruction, only half of the spirit-swallowing bugs fell to the air. The other half flapped their wings again and rushed toward the nearby golden core cultivators. Master, Li Zongbao was shocked again. Heng Zhao was very close to Liang Mingfu, so he was the first to bear the brunt of the self-destruction. When he hurriedly dodged, more spirit-swallowing bugs were pushed to his side by the airwaves. Unfortunately, this wasn't the most important thing. Right at this moment, countless sword cries resounded from beneath the cultivators, and tens of thousands of enormous flying swords charged straight out from the ground. Sword light flickered, and sword chi crisscrossed. It was precisely the swordsmen that Lu Ruochang had hidden within the spirit-devouring grand formation that had attacked at the same time. Previously, only the spirit-swallowing bugs were wreaking havoc in the soul-devouring formation. Under the control of Fan Kuyuan's pagoda, their main targets were the cultivators at the golden core stage. The foundation establishment and chi refining disciples were only disturbed by the so-called gold-swallowing bugs and earth-swallowing bugs. Of course, many disciples were killed by the real spirit-swallowing bugs, and their corpses were everywhere. Now, the sword formation showed its sharp teeth again. Its target was the foundation establishment disciples who had lost their fighting spirit. Li Zongbao wanted to help his master, but the huge sword was condensed by many sword lights. Obviously, it was the joint attack of a group of sword cultivators. How could Li Zongbao be distracted? He hurriedly clapped his hands and habitually took out the immortal piercing whip. However, the immortal piercing whip had been destroyed by the spirit-swallowing bugs. How could it be useful? Li Zongbao sighed and hurriedly looked for other magic weapons. Fortunately, Xiao Mao and Fairy Hong Xia were beside him. The two of them temporarily protected Li Zongbao. The huge sword of the soul-devouring formation was born. As the sword chi surged, hundreds of spirit-swallowing bugs were attracted to it. However, in the sky, the fluctuations of the pagoda suddenly intensified. The spirit-swallowing bugs only hesitated for a moment before they rushed towards the golden core stage cultivators again. Now, there were less than 160,000 Dao sect cultivators left. They had long been reduced to mere chickens and pottery dogs. There was no way they could form an army. During the first two battles, they could still form simple formations to fight against the giant sword. Now, they could only rely on their instincts to flee in all directions. Many disciples had even died at the hands of other cultivators. For a moment, screams rang out everywhere. In the flashing sword lights, it was like purgatory. Not only that, under the attack of the spirit-swallowing bugs, more and more golden core stage cultivators used their final killing moves. One by one, protective talismans were used. Although these nascent soul stage cultivators could kill some of the spirit-swallowing bugs, once they used their talismans, they attracted more spirit-swallowing bugs. It was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. In just a short time, more than 10 golden core stage cultivators died. Among them, There were several Golden Core stage elders in the conference hall. Ko Xiangling of the Yongyi sect, Zhu Junwei of the Cool Breeze Valley, Yuan Yiguang of the Blue Li sect, and Qing Ziyi of the Mo Sang Mountain were all cultivators in the early stage of Golden Core stage. They had been injured outside the Sword Tomb. Although they had recuperated for a while, how could they protect themselves under the attack of the spirit-swallowing bugs? One by one, the spirit-swallowing bugs rushed into their bodies and swallowed their golden cores. Hu Ping from the Blazing Fire Mountain was proficient in the art of controlling fire. Wisps of flame flew to the left and right from time to time, luring the spirit-swallowing bugs to fly to the left and right. At the same time, she also wandered on the edge of the cliff of death. Huang Feng from the Exotic Beast sect was also strange. He had a strange beast that looked like a green snake coiled around his finger. From time to time, he would make a sharp hissing sound from his mouth, which made the besieging spirit-swallowing bugs a little afraid of him. However, these cultivators in the early stage of Golden Core stage were just on the verge of death. They would die if they didn't do anything. Heng Ming and other cultivators in the middle stage of Golden Core stage were still trying their best to hold on. When they heard the sound of self-explosion from time to time, they felt bitter in their hearts. They knew that the Taoism sect cultivators were really defeated in this battle. However, they still had a little hope in their hearts. They wanted to find a chance to escape from this spirit-swallowing formation. Wu, like a gust of cold wind, a chill appeared on Heng Ming's face. Oh! Heng Ming was slightly stunned. He was a cultivator in the Golden Core stage. Usually he was immune to cold and heat. How could he feel the cold wind at will? Not to mention that he was fighting hard against the spirit-swallowing bugs. Heng Ming couldn't help looking around. When he looked around, he felt a chill in his heart. As far as the eye could see, there was a flash of sword light. Outside the sword light, there was a thick fog. Within the fog, wisps of dark green were faintly discernible. At the same time, there were strange cries of ghosts and howls of wolves coming from within the fog. Obviously, the fog had been there for a long time, but Heng Ming didn't notice it. All the disciples in the Foundation establishment stage and the Qi refining stage who had escaped earlier were forced back by the fog. Although these disciples activated their flying talismans and flying skills, it was obvious that their Dharma power had been exhausted. From time to time, some disciples were infected by the fog. However, those who were sprayed by the fog all fell from the sky without making a sound and no longer moved. Hiss! Heng Ming really sucked in a breath of cold air. His heart was cold and an unparalleled sense of despair rose in his heart. LV Rucheng had really put in a lot of effort in this square sword formation. He had used all his methods. The Yin-Yang sword formation killed cultivators in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage and below. The 5-element sword formation killed cultivators in the Golden Core stage and above, and the spirit-swallowing bugs killed cultivators in the Golden Core stage and above. As for the remaining cultivators, they were killed by this mysterious fog. From the moment the hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators fell into the square sword formation, their fates had already been decided by the swordsmen of the Heng Kingdom. LV Ruochang would not let a single cultivator fly out of this sword formation, no matter if it was Qi refining, Foundation establishment, or Golden Core. There are dozens of sects in the Dao sect. Why are there no senior brothers in the later stage of the Golden Core stage participating in this battle? At this moment, Heng Ming suddenly thought of LV Ruochang's question. Could it be that the Dao sect is bound to lose in this battle of Dao cultivators? Do the teachers of each sect already know? Or is there another reason? Heng Ming naturally did not have an answer to this question. Looking at the fog flashing with green light, Heng Ming had already lost the courage to fight. He also did not have the strength to resist the attacks of dozens of spirit-swallowing bugs. Even if a senior brother in the later stage of the Golden Core stage came, he would not have a second chance of survival. At this moment, in the thick fog, a green shadow gradually became clear. It was the palace guarding bug, which had already become 10 feet long. This palace guarding bug's body was strangely distorted and the green light was flickering rapidly. On the palace guarding bug's back, Night Rain, who was dressed in black, gradually appeared. Chapter 2686. Soul Armament. Hung Feng's body trembled uncontrollably as he stared at the beetle. Ever since he took charge of the council hall, he had read up on many of the previous battles in the council hall. He had even read up on some of the information and records from Sky Patrol City. Thus, he had some understanding of the situation in the Huan Kingdom. Now that he saw the green glow of the beetle, which was as agile as a spirit beast, how could he not know that it was a soul armament? Lu Rung has gone mad. In order to win this war, he actually lured soul cultivators into the Huan Kingdom. Heng Ji turned pale with fright. But when he saw Yi Yu's true face, he was a bit surprised. This soul warrior seems to be different from what is recorded in the ancient records. Master? Li Zongbao's voice sounded distant. Hung Feng was startled again. When he looked again, a spirit-devouring bug had already climbed onto his protective golden light. Forget it, everything is about to end. Heng Ju raised his head and looked over. Li Zongbao, Fairy Hong Xia and the rest were trying their best to resist the sword light. Seeing his proud disciple like this, Heng Ju felt gratified. Perhaps, this kind of life is what Zongbao should have. But, you won't be able to see it? Seeing a spirit-devouring bug bite through Heng Feng's protective golden light without any resistance, Li Zongbao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. At this critical moment, when all the Dao sect cultivators were about to be wiped out, an indescribable pressure surged from the west of the sword formation like a rising tide. This pressure was very weak in the eyes of Heng Ming and the rest, but it was simple, tenacious, and peculiar. This pressure was like a rising tide, instantly enveloping the great spirit-devouring formation and even surging toward the east. Following which, a huge sealing force descended from the sky, completely enveloping the entire four-direction sword array. This sealing force was so strong that all the cultivators, swordsmen, and even the spirit-devouring bugs stopped in their tracks. Someone is condensing their core. When Heng Jiao felt this pressure, he immediately knew that it was the pressure of a golden core cultivator. Just like Yu Tong, when the sealing force appeared, Heng Jiao also understood that it was the celestial phenomenon of a cultivator's breakthrough. What a pity! Hung Feng felt a trace of regret. This late-stage foundation establishment disciple is not condensing his core at the right time. If it was a few days earlier, he would have succeeded. Now that he's condensing his core here, there are spirit-devouring bugs, swordsmen, and even soul warriors. How could he succeed? However, the power of imprisonment was not what Heng Zhao had imagined. It grew stronger and stronger, and everyone was trapped in it. Especially those spirit-swallowing bugs, they were tightly confined and could not move at all. Like Yu Tong, Heng Feng's heart was in turmoil. He was a middle-stage golden core disciple of the Utopia faction, so he was very clear about the details of a late-stage golden core cultivator's pregnancy. He knew better than Yu Tong about the signs of a late-stage golden core cultivator's pregnancy. This sealing force could only be produced by a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator's pregnancy. It was absolutely impossible for a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator to condense his core. Which senior brother is actually in the sword catacomb? Hung Feng was almost stunned. No cultivator, no matter if it was the state of Shi, the state of Meng, or the state of Lian, with any common sense, would conceive a baby in the sword catacomb. However, Hung Feng was only stunned for a moment. Then, a thought of escaping from death appeared in his mind. His previously dead vitality sprouted like a bud. Hung Feng knew that in the early years, the Taoism sect cultivators who were trapped in the sword formation relied on several late-stage golden core cultivators to conceive a baby. From there, they won a chance of survival and defeated the swordsmen who were already confident of victory. Now, wasn't this, the Taoism sect cultivators, repeating the same trick? Wasn't this the best opportunity for them to kill the spirit-swallowing bugs and escape? Almost without thinking, Hung Feng reached out his hand and took out the nascent soul talisman with difficulty from his storage bag. Then, he activated the Dharma power in his body with difficulty. Buzz, with a flash of brilliance, the nascent soul hand slowly expanded. In this confinement that was comparable to that of a pregnant baby, the nascent soul hand could still be activated. Since Heng Feng had such a thought, De Sun, Xiong Huasong, and the others naturally had the same idea. All the golden core cultivators in the conference hall who had talismans activated their nascent soul hands. Although there were hundreds or even thousands of spirit-swallowing bugs, they were different from the golden core cultivators in this confinement phenomenon. They trembled very much, as if they were extremely afraid. The fluctuations of the pagoda in the sky were also disturbed by this confinement force. The spirit-swallowing bugs were no longer under control. They froze in midair, and the nascent soul hands grabbed them and crushed them to death. Damn it! What? Why is it a pregnant baby again? Outside the spirit-swallowing formation, LV Ruochang and the others were also affected by this confinement force. Their expressions changed greatly. LV Ruochang almost stomped his feet in midair and said hatefully, Which golden core cultivator is pregnant? Among the hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the Taoist sect, there is no disciple in the later stage of golden core, right? Seeing that the confinement force was getting stronger, LV Ruochang was so angry that his whole body trembled. Boom! A huge explosion came from the spirit-swallowing formation in the distance. A burst of yellow brilliance shot up into the sky and shook the confinement force. Fan Ming Yuan, Fan Jin. LV Ruochang saw this and his expression changed again. Inside the spirit-devouring formation, yellow light soared into the sky, and the area within a radius of several thousand feet was hit by a powerful wave of air. The restrictive force inside the formation was shattered by the explosion of the pagoda that Fan Kuyuan had turned into. The remaining hundreds of spirit-devouring bugs once again had blood-red light in their eyes, and they madly charged toward the nascent soul hands of Heng Feng and the others. This time, the spirit-swallowing bugs were even more powerful. In a moment, the nascent soul hands were devoured. The hope that the Taoist sect cultivators had just had was snuffed out again. Fan Jin. LV Ruochang looked up at the sky and said sorrowfully, The warriors of the sword region will never forget your contributions. Then, he urged the sword light under his feet to fly slowly in the confinement force. He said coldly, Even if there is a golden core cultivator in the later stage of golden core, so what? Not to mention this spirit-swallowing formation, even my final killing move is not something that a pregnant Tianzhao can defeat. However, before LV Ruochang could fly more than 10 feet, strong hurricanes were set off in the space enveloped by the confinement force. The center of these hurricanes was a small virtual point. As these hurricanes grew stronger, the virtual point gradually revealed a shiny silver-white light spot. Once this light spot appeared, it immediately condensed and grew larger. In a moment, it grew to the size of a thumb, then a fist, and finally a dipper. This dipper was surrounded by a huge whirlpool. The golden spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the whirlpool was constantly gathering, forming many pearls. The golden spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the entire square sword formation was swept away and turned into these crystals. For a moment, the radiance of the magic tools and magic treasures on the battlefield dimmed, and the sword light gradually disappeared. Some cultivators who had exhausted their magic power couldn't even stand steadily in the air, and actually fell from the sky. Of course, this situation only stagnated for a moment. Gusts of wind swept up in the formation again. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth and sword chi in other parts of the sword tomb surged toward the formation again. LV Ruochang was stunned. Heng Teng was even more stunned. But while Heng Teng was stunned, he was also pleasantly surprised. This was because the spirit-swallowing bugs attacking the nascent soul hands were obviously attracted by the vast amount of golden spiritual chi of heaven and earth. They did not care about the hands of the nascent soul and the golden core cultivators. Thousands of spirit-swallowing bugs, whether real or fake, rushed toward the huge crystal. The spirit-swallowing formation was no longer effective. This This does not seem to be a pregnant senior brother at the peak of the later stage of golden core. A pregnant senior brother shouldn't have crystals. Hung Ting almost stretched out a hand from his throat. Only pure spirit tide can form a nascent soul, right? But, if it is not a pregnant senior brother, how can there be such a huge crystal? Perhaps this senior brother's nascent soul is different from that of ordinary cultivators. This could only be Heng Ting's guess. Quick. After LV Ruochang recovered from his shock, he did not have time to care about the abnormality of the pregnant senior brother. He cried out to the group of third-grade illusory swordsmen, "Let's hurry and find the location of this senior brother's nascent soul before he is pregnant. From the looks of it, he is not far away. Maybe we can take the opportunity to kill him." But what about the golden core cultivators in the spirit swallowing formation? Ruoling was a little weak, but she still asked, "It is very difficult to kill a nascent soul. Why don't we take the opportunity to kill the rest of the Dao sect disciples?" LV Ruochang said confidently, "I have a soul-killing formation outside the spirit-swallowing formation. Even if there is a pregnant senior brother." As he spoke, a rumbling sound of thunder rang out from the sky above the sword catacomb. Within 100 miles of the sky, the rolling dark clouds surged rapidly, and faintly discernible golden threads danced in the dark clouds. A vast killing intent, through the power of imprisonment, filled the space between heaven and earth. LV Ruochang sensed the killing intent of this heavenly thunder. How could he not know that this was the nemesis of spirit warriors? A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth, and he was practically dispirited in midair. "Junior sister LV." Ruoling was shocked and hurriedly flew forward to support LV Ruochang. LV Ruochang's eyes were lifeless, like a dead fish. He stared straight at the sky and muttered, "In the sword catacomb where lightning does not occur, when will there be heavenly thunder? This cultivator who is pregnant in the sword catacomb, who is this expert? Bless, since LV Hashing was born. Could it be that this is what she said? That I was too clever in my calculations, and in the end, I ruined Qingqing's life?" LV Ruochang was sad. Could it be that I can only fail at the last minute? This is predestined. Chapter 2687. Just as LV Ruochang expected, outside the spirit-devouring formation, the rolling fog was still moving forward slowly and steadily, although it was affected by the confinement force. Although the palace-guarding bug and Yiyu could not fly in the air, they had already landed on the ground, but they were still crawling forward step by step. However, sooner or later, they would meet the Taoist sect cultivators, and these cultivators would be killed by Yiyu's soul-destroying formation. Heng Zhao and the others were ready for the final battle. However, when the heavenly thunder broke through the confinement formation, Yiyu's face changed greatly. Others did not know, but he saw clearly through the soul-destroying formation. All the vengeful souls were struggling painfully in the heavenly thunder, and many of them had turned into white smoke and disappeared. More powerful vengeful souls, attracted by the soul-destroying formation, were fleeing in panic. Yiyu looked at the sky, and he was also confused. But just as he was confused, the heavenly thunder in the sky became more intense. The golden light was shining, and it slowly gathered in a place in the west. Oh no! In the golden light, the heavenly thunder became more and more powerful. Yiyu's soul-destroying formation trembled in fear, and the green light around it gradually dimmed. Yiyu complained secretly and hurriedly recited the soul incantation, and the soul-destroying formation shrank rapidly. When the soul-destroying formation was restored, Yiyu looked at the 40,000 vengeful souls of the Sword Mountain and the 4 sword schools reluctantly. He wanted to activate the soul-destroying formation to collect them, but these vengeful souls were trapped in a quagmire under the heavenly thunder. No matter how Yiyu activated the soul-destroying formation, he could not take any vengeful souls away from the heavenly thunder. Without the vengeful souls, how could Yiyu dare to face the golden core cultivators? Yiyu's figure slowly disappeared as he prepared to leave. However, Yiyu's figure flickered several times, but he just couldn't disappear. Under the might of the heavenly lightning, his soul cultivation movement technique was also affected. Kill. Heng Zhao and the others were killing the spirit-devouring bugs while observing Yiyu. They saw Yiyu collect the soul-destroying formation, and his figure flickered several times, and then he turned around and left. How could they not know that he had given up the soul-destroying formation? Overjoyed, he hurriedly circulated his true essence to fight against the binding force while killing the swordsman. Relying on the strength of a single person to break Lu Ruochang's plan of several years, relying on the strength of a single person to save hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators from certain death. Other than Xiaohua, who was preparing to condense his core in the Brahma Gold Palace, in this Dawn Rain continent, who else could it be? However, Xiaohua's situation was not as simple as Heng Zhao and LV Ruochang thought. Xiaohua originally wanted to rely on his advanced celestial phenomenon restriction to kill Yu Tong, but just as he was about to make a move, a tearing pain suddenly appeared in his lower dantian, as if his entire dantian was about to be torn apart. When his divine sense sank into his lower dantian, he was unconsciously scared out of his wits. He saw a light purple thing slowly rotating between his two lightning cores. A huge suction force came from this light purple thing. This suction force rushed into his qi refining and foundation establishment meridians. This situation was originally recorded in Zhen Qing's experience of condensing one's core. Other than the two lightning cores, everything else was roughly the same. However, what caused Xiaohua to turn pale with fright was the suction force generated by the core condensation. This suction force was divided into two, each containing the power of the heavenly Dao. The power of the heavenly Dao in these two suction forces was different according to the Dao of Yin and Yang. One was Yang, the other was Yin. They were separately sucked into his two meridians. If it was an ordinary cultivator who condensed their core, the Yin and Yang suction forces would be completely balanced. Because of the different Yin and Yang attributes, the solidified true essence absorbed would produce a fusion of Yin and Yang, which would allow the true essence to condense into a golden core in the dantian. But at this moment, the suction force in Xiaohua's two meridians was completely different. The suction force in the qi refining meridians was more than 40% greater than the suction force in the foundation establishment meridians. This enormous suction force twisted Xiaohua's lower dantian. This kind of heart-tearing and lung-splitting pain was more severe than any kind of needle pricking. Moreover, this suction force had already penetrated deep into his meridians. The unbalanced power twisted all the meridians in Xiaohua's body. Seeing this situation, Xiaohua understood. If it was an ordinary core condensation, then he would have taken the dry separation pill. The dry separation pill could accelerate the solidification of the true essence flowing within the meridians. This solidified true essence would be sent into the light purple area by the suction force, and the golden core that countless foundation establishment cultivators yearned for day and night would condense there. However, would Xiaohua dare to take the dry separation pill now? His two suction forces were completely unbalanced. Not to mention whether or not it would affect the two meridians, even the amount of true essence used to condense the golden core would be different because of the difference in the Yin and Yang suction forces. And with different amounts of Yin and Yang true essence, could it condense into a complete golden core? Xiaohua could almost think of the answer with his heel. It was absolutely impossible. The only result of doing this was that the Yang true essence would be greater than the Yin true essence, resulting in the asymmetry of the golden core. This golden core could only collapse and it could only die. There was not a moment when Xiaohua didn't want to cultivate to the golden core realm, but now, he had truly condensed his golden core, yet he was incomparably regretful. This young master. Why did I have to cultivate to the 18th layer of qi refining that day? Why didn't this young master think of the difference between the Yin and Yang suction forces? Xiaohua was incomparably remorseful. Martial Uncle Zhen Qing, why didn't you write an extra sentence in the jade slip? However, all of Xiaohua's remorse, all of his complaints, how could they change reality? On the Dawn Rain continent, No one had ever cultivated a cultivation method after the 12th layer of qi refining. This kind of conformist matter was bound to have a cause and effect. If it wasn't for the fact that the meridians refined by the 12th layer of qi refining were exactly the same as the meridians refined by the 3rd layer of foundation establishment, how could this qi refining cultivation method only have the 12th layer, and not the 11th or the 13th layer? Perhaps many years ago, there were people who cultivated to the 11th or 13th layer. Perhaps they also failed or even died when condensing their golden core at this time. Perhaps these lessons were passed down by word of mouth many years ago, or even recorded in a taboo. However, after so many years, cultivators had already forgotten about it. Everyone thought that the 12th layer of qi refining was a matter of course, but who would really think about why it was precisely the 12th layer? Even if Xiaohua asked Master Wu Xian to answer, Wu Xian might not necessarily be able to say anything. Instead, he would probably fly into a rage and berate Xiaohua, forcing Xiaohua to cultivate peacefully. However, Xiaohua had the memories of cultivating to the 18th layer of qi refining, yet he wouldn't ask Wu Xian for advice. Furthermore, Zhen Qing's jade slip also didn't have any records of the balance between yin and yang. Most importantly, in order to find his own origin, Xiaohua chose to cultivate to the 18th layer of qi refining without hesitation. All of these were enough to lead to today's tragedy. Of course, before these tragedies, Xiaohua once again tasted the countless benefits of cultivating to the 18th layer of qi refining. His true essence was a lot more vigorous than ordinary cultivators, and he had the advantage in fights. His divine sense was also far stronger than others, and his cultivation speed was also far faster than others. Unfortunately, everything had a price. Although many times, this price was their life, there would always be people who would risk everything to do it. Others laugh at me for being too crazy, and I laugh at them for not being able to see through it. Xiaohua was truly at his wit's end. He smiled bitterly in his heart. Originally, I thought others were idiots and I had already seen through it. But unfortunately, I was the idiot and others had already seen through it. This 13th layer of qi refining cultivation method was placed in the Imperial Thunder sect, yet no one cultivated it. I don't believe that with so many capable people, not a single one of them could see through it. Even if they didn't know about the meridians in the entire body, how could they not know if a foundation establishment master explained it to them? Why didn't they cultivate it? Wasn't it because of the balance between yin and yang? Wasn't it because the qi refining cultivation method on Xiaoyu continent only had the 12th layer? Perhaps there were also people who tried, but all of them fell. But, in the end, I'm different from them. I seem to remember that this qi refining cultivation method originally had the 18th layer. In order to find my origin, I could only... it seems. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's heart suddenly moved, and a bright light flashed in his mind. Since the current suction force is different, the root of the difference lies in the two meridians. Since this young master knows about the meridians in the entire body, why can't this young master create a meridian that is similar to the meridians in qi refining after the foundation establishment meridians? Xiaohua immediately thought of the meridians in the entire body that he saw when he was dual cultivating with Fairy Hongxia. But Xiaohua hesitated again. I don't have a method to refine the meridians in the future. That's right, different meridians, different cultivation stages, require different refining methods. Xiaoyu continent doesn't have a so-called universal cultivation method, and even the water attribute and fire attribute physiques cultivation methods are different. Although Xiaohua knew the location of the meridians without the corresponding refining method, it was also useless. It seemed that he had reached the end of his rope again. Xiaohua was somewhat impatient, but within his dantian, the two lightning cores were still revolving, emitting hissing lightning. That light purple thing slightly swayed, and the suction force within was still increasing. This is really going to kill me. Xiaohua really wanted to stop condensing his core right now. If it was someone else, perhaps they would really be able to stop. On Xiaoyu continent, cultivators who were stuck at this stage were as numerous as carps crossing the river. One more Xiaohua didn't count as anything. But what was worse was that the two lightning cores were constantly revolving, emitting lightning. Xiaohua was simply powerless to stop it, and the suction force that was tearing his dantian only became stronger, not stronger. Xiaohua himself didn't know whether or not his dantian would be torn apart by this suction force in the end. Xiaohua's primordial spirit, which was comprehending the primordial spirit's sword controlling technique, didn't have time to continue comprehending and hurriedly flipped through the many cultivation methods that he had comprehended before. Earth attribute, water attribute, fire attribute, qi refining, foundation establishment, gold core. Xiaohua had collected a lot of cultivation methods, and the meridians involved were also not few. But unfortunately, there wasn't a foundation establishment cultivation method that required meridians. Suddenly, a crazy idea emerged in his mind. Create a cultivation method. Chapter 2688. A self-created cultivation technique? Thinking of this outrageous idea, Xiaohua bitterly smiled. Every cultivation method was a summary of their own cultivation process by a senior with an extremely profound cultivation base, exploring a path that no one had ever set foot on before from the height they stood on. And these seniors were at least nascent soul cultivators, right? So much so that the cultivation techniques created by the senior experts, after their creation, had gone through many years of analysis and modification by many capable people before they finally took shape and could be practiced by low-level cultivators. Xiaohua's current cultivation base was only at the late foundation establishment stage, yet he still wanted to create a cultivation technique for foundation establishment cultivators. This was simply an impossible matter. Normally, even if Xiaohua was beaten to death, he still wouldn't think in this direction. Even if he was really asked to do so, he definitely wouldn't do it. Perhaps he would only smile lightly and say, "Let's leave this matter to those with outstanding talent to worry about. It's better for us commoners to tuck our tails between our legs." But at this moment, the situation was so dangerous. At the juncture of life and death, how could there be any elegance? Perhaps only in this kind of critical moment could a person's potential be stimulated, allowing them to see divine abilities that they normally couldn't see. Seeing the suction force tearing at his dantian and distorting it, Xiaohua stepped into a desperate situation. The idea of creating a cultivation technique gave him a glimmer of hope. With only a slight hesitation, Xiaohua stepped into a domain that he had never thought of before. I've previously practiced the dragon transformation art, so I'm extremely familiar with the meridians in my body. In terms of the path of discovering the meridians, it's 100 times better than those masters who don't know the meridians. In addition, the key at this time is to balance the yin and yang suction forces. It's not necessary to cultivate from the early foundation establishment stage to the late foundation establishment stage. I only need to open up my meridians. It's not necessary to refine my true essence. Also, I have many cultivation techniques here. Even if I don't know how to create a cultivation technique, it's not necessarily impossible to succeed as long as I follow along. Furthermore, I usually practice the dragonization art as well. The tenacity of my meridians is incomparable to that of others. When I'm developing and refining my meridians, I can correct any abnormalities as soon as I notice them. There might not be any mistakes. Lastly, there is an extremely large amount of metal attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the sword tomb, and there is also an extremely abundant amount of sword qi. Furthermore, I obtained the secret art of transforming sword qi into true yuan from the Yu family, so I don't have to worry about absorbing the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth. The more Xiaohua thought about it, the more he felt that there was a glimmer of hope in front of him. Immediately, his heart was filled with incomparable faith. In this world, there will always be a first cultivation technique. This first cultivation technique might not necessarily be the work of a nascent soul or spirit-severing stage senior, since there was someone who could make such an earth-shattering move and create a cultivation world in this world. If that's the case, why can't this young master step on the shoulders of the predecessors and create a simple foundation-building technique? With such determination, and in this extremely dangerous place, Xiaohua actually made an astonishing move. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes with difficulty, enduring the heart-wrenching pain. The cultivation techniques that he had seen before flashed through his mind, and he tried to find some incantations to refine his meridians. At the same time, the dragonization art also stopped under the control of the other Yuan spirit. That Yuan spirit also gathered at the new meridians and carefully examined the effects of the incantations. At the same time, Xiaohua controlled Si Yinding to open a gap in the Buddhist gold formation, allowing the metal attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth and sword qi of the sword tomb to pour in. The heavenly infusion technique in his body was activated again, and the metal attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth and sword qi quickly poured into his body, rushing into the meridians that Xiaohua was preparing to open. As he tried the incantations one by one, strands of true qi were refined, and strands of true essence were produced with great difficulty. Needless to say, almost all of the existing incantations were useless. Xiaohua slowly tried to modify individual details according to the meridian's perception. Once the meridians were smooth, the refinement of true qi would immediately proceed. If the details were not satisfied, Xiaohua would have no choice but to figure out a new incantation according to the previous incantations, and then use this incantation to refine the spiritual energy. Time passed slowly like this. In this irreversible time, Xiaohua was racing against time, trying to create a new cultivation technique before the gravitational imbalance collapsed, and to balance the power. Fortunately, Xiaohua's Yuan spirit was very strong, and in this short period of time, he was able to pay attention to many details. When the first strand of true qi was produced in the new meridians, Xiaohua's heart had already calmed down, and the originally extremely unbearable tearing also gradually weakened. Looking at the Buddhist gold formation where Xiaohua was, a huge vortex was slowly forming. Xiaohua was evolving a cultivation technique from the early stage of foundation establishment to the late stage of foundation establishment, and the amount of spiritual energy required was enormous. Although there were large crystals in the range of several hundred li, those crystals were the celestial phenomenon of core condensation and would not be affected by Xiaohua's cultivation at this time. Kachin, in the high sky, fine golden heavenly lightning was suspended, from time to time rolling and brewing, but it did not fall for a long time. In the sword tomb where 10,000 lightning bolts were not born, the rich gold qi that had accumulated for many years was slowly being defeated by the might of the heavenly lightning. Countless vengeful spirits were fleeing in the midst of the heavenly lightning, trying their best to escape from the shroud of the heavenly lightning. However, this heavenly lightning had an endless suction force, and although it was extremely far away from the vengeful spirits, those vengeful spirits were unable to escape. This was the gold qi that had been defeated by the heavenly lightning, and a huge amount of sword qi was slowly flowing in the sword tomb. The vortex above the Buddhist gold formation was so large that a lot of spirit qi and sword qi inevitably fell into it, and as more and more spirit qi and sword qi flowed in, it formed a torrent that entered the sea. How could Xiaohua know that he was already changing the current situation of the sword tomb? He was only immersed in the tranquility of creating a cultivation technique. The huge amount of spirit qi and sword qi was absorbed into his body by the immortal body-filling technique. The spirit qi flowed into his meridians, and the sword qi was once again transformed into spirit qi by the falling gold mountain's secret technique. Following the spirit qi, it flowed into his meridians, and within his meridians, this spirit qi was just in time for Xiaohua to try out the newly created cultivation technique chant. It was absolutely impossible to practice the entire cultivation technique before the suction force tore his dantian and body apart. But under Xiaohua's attempts, new meridians were gradually being opened, and the yin-yang suction force also had a place to go. The huge difference between the yin and yang suction forces was gradually being changed. Moreover, this change was extremely slow in the beginning, but later on, it became faster and faster. This was the same as when Xiaohua was creating a cultivation technique. In the beginning, it was admittedly unfamiliar and at a loss. But with failure and success, he gradually grasped the knack of it, and the speed at which the cultivation technique chant was being produced became faster and faster. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps several hours, perhaps several days, when Xiaohua finally practiced the last chant, Xiaohua calmly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with incomparable confidence and incomparable calmness. He slightly sensed it and let out a sigh of relief, secretly thinking that he was lucky. In fact, when Xiaohua was creating the cultivation technique, he had neglected another crucial point, and that was that the 12th layer of qi refining was equivalent to the 3rd layer of foundation establishment. Xiaohua's 18th layer of qi refining was only 6 layers more than the 12th layer of qi refining. If he were to create the meridians of the 3rd layer of foundation establishment, then wouldn't the yin-yang suction force be greater than the yin-yang suction force? Wouldn't that cause another imbalance? This problem was also something that Xiaohua realized in the middle of creating the cultivation technique. But at that time, how could Xiaohua retreat? He could only brace himself and force his way through. Perhaps it was the effect of the Phoenix Jade Talisman, or perhaps Xiaohua only focused on opening his meridians and did not thoroughly refine his true essence. This time, a balance was formed. Naturally, in this balance, there was no longer any pain, only a trace of fetters, like a fishbone in his throat. After all, Xiaohua's newly opened meridians were not completely opened. Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile as he muttered to himself, "This cultivation technique should be my fortune gate's first foundation establishment cultivation technique. Even, it's a rare cultivation technique for the metal element physique." However, after the joy, Xiaohua was bewildered again. In fact, it had only been a few days since the beginning of the creation of the cultivation method. In such a short period of time, how could it be so smooth? Even if he was really talented and could create his own cultivation technique, how could opening meridians and refining his true essence be something that could be done in a short period of time? Xiaohua was prepared to risk his life to delay the core condensation process for several weeks or even several months. To be able to succeed in a few days was definitely not what he had imagined. Could it be, my meridians don't need to be expanded? Only need to be able to refine my true essence? Could it be that when I cultivate the dragon transformation art, Xiaohua couldn't help but have some doubts? Forget it, this is a good thing, and now is not the time to investigate. I'll think about it when I don't need to open my meridians. Thinking of this, Xiaohua activated his newly created cultivation technique. Streams of majestic true essence condensed into true essence and rushed towards the final barrier. Boom, a faint muffled sound rang out, as if a wall had been pushed down. The two attractive forces in Xiaohua's dantian suddenly became incomparably balanced, and the true essence in Xiaohua's meridians became still at the same time. The two attractive forces of yin and yang blended together like water and milk, and all the large crystals in the cage involuntarily trembled. Xiaohua understood that this was the best time to condense the core as mentioned in the Zhenqing Jade Slip. Without thinking, he slapped his hand and took out a dozen dry separation pills from the space and was about to put them into his mouth. But at this time, a vigorous sword qi rushed into his body, and the already stopped heaven and man body bestowment technique was once again attacked by a large amount of metal element heaven and earth spiritual energy. Xiaohua's body involuntarily trembled. Chapter 2689. Oh, ah. Xiaohua was slightly stunned. His divine sense swept over, and he was immediately frightened by the huge vortex above his head. Without thinking, he hurriedly urged the Scene Cauldron to close the gap in the Brahma gold array. However, the almost endless sword qi and spiritual energy followed the previous trajectory and directly poured in. Xiaohua simply couldn't close the Brahma gold array under the impact of the sword qi that was stronger than a waterfall. He couldn't even stop the sword qi from rushing into his body. The endless stream of sword qi and metal qi was like a torrential river and sea. Xiaohua's back was covered in cold sweat. It was really one wave after another. Each wave was higher than the one before. If Xiaohua was careless, he would fall in this wave. Withdraw, Xiaohua shook his hand and took out the yin-yang sword gourd that was previously stored in the space. He urged the sword gourd to move. The endless metal qi, and sword qi continuously rushed into the sword gourd. However, in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the sword gourd emitted a green and red brilliance. Xiaohua understood that the yin-yang sword gourd couldn't absorb any more, so he hurriedly put the sword gourd back into the space. "Forget it, this young master." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He was once again forced into a corner, once again tied to a pirate ship. "First drink poison to quench thirst, then we'll talk." For a moment, Xiaohua could only activate the dragon transformation art, agitating all the meridians in his body. The two sets of yin and yang meridians heart sutras were displayed. The heavenly infusion technique drew in an endless stream of heaven and earth spirit energy, refining the true energy in his meridians and forming true essence. Rumble. As Xiaohua urged the dragon transformation art, a burst of muffled thunder sounded. It seemed to be in Xiaohua's ears, but it also seemed to be in Xiaohua's body. The power of heavenly thunder was born from the surroundings, slowly imprisoning Xiaohua. Lightning tribulation again. Xiaohua felt the familiar feeling of lightning tribulation when he first entered the Foundation establishment realm. He couldn't help but be shocked and deeply bitterly smile. "Forget it, it's like this anyway. Then let's do it together." Thinking of this, Xiaohua simply ignored the lightning tribulation. He only focused on the sword qi that was poured in. As for the sword qi that was poured in, Xiaohua didn't dare to use a secret technique to convert it into true qi. However, he had long since comprehended and modified the Falling Gold Mountain secret technique, which allowed him to directly transform the sword qi into sword origin. Since there was a steady stream of sword essence being produced, Xiaohua very naturally flipped through the sword techniques for sword cultivation. He opened his mouth and spat out 2 flying swords, cheerfully flying around Xiaohua. Starting from the most basic part, he started cultivating bit by bit. The strands of sword essence condensed by Xiaohua rushed out of the sword technique in his hand, as if chasing after the 2 flying swords. They formed circle after circle of mysterious sword essence around Xiaohua's body. Inside the sword tomb, with Xiaohua's Buddhist gold great array as the center, the sword qi and spirit qi formed a hurricane. This hurricane was like a tidal wave crashing against the shore, surging towards Xiaohua. As time passed, this hurricane grew larger and larger, and the area it affected also increased. At the edge of the sword catacomb, as if it had sensed the phenomenon of Xiaohua condensing his core, all of the purple jasmine flowers bloomed. Among the bright purple petals, a blood-colored fruit was revealed. This blood-colored fruit was so bright that it reflected the rising sun outside the dense dark clouds, emitting a faint light. Outside the sword tomb, the scattered cultivators of the Dao sect and the sword cultivators of the Huan kingdom, as well as the disciples of the cultivation clans who had come to the vicinity of the sword tomb in search of opportunities, were all shocked by the sudden appearance of this strange phenomenon. All of them had shock on their faces as they looked at the faintly visible lightning flashing above the sword tomb. They knew that something important must have happened for there to be a strange phenomenon in the sword tomb that was devoid of lightning. Perhaps it's time for the cultivation war to come to an end. Everyone had this thought, but the Dao sect cultivators who were trapped in the 4 directions sword formation did not think so. Even the sword region swordsmen who set up the formation did not think so. LV Ruchang and the other 3rd-grade illusory swordsmen had already arrived near the spirit-devouring Great Array. They had already reorganized the Huan country swordsmen into a new Great Array. However, because the spirit qi of heaven and earth in the sword tomb was confined by the phenomenon of Xiaohua condensing his golden core, although the spirit qi of heaven and earth outside the range of the golden core was constantly flowing into the sword formation, this spirit qi of heaven and earth was once again sucked in by the suction vortex formed by Xiaohua earlier. Therefore, there was not much spirit qi in the sword formation for the swordsmen and cultivators to use. LV Ruochang and the other sword cultivators wanted to attack, but they were powerless. The swordsmen could not use their flying swords to attack the cultivators. On the other hand, the cultivators wanted to escape, but they were surrounded by the swordsmen and were powerless to do so. Moreover, LV Ruochang and the other third-grade illusory swordsmen were injured. Although Heng Ming and the other middle-stage gold core cultivators were weaker than them, they had spirit talismans in their hands. Although the spirit talismans were not as powerful as before in the hands of Heng Ming and the others, they were more than enough to protect themselves. Therefore, the sword cultivators and cultivators were temporarily in a stalemate, each looking forward to the situation turning around. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. Although it was only a few days, it was an earth-shaking change for Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's sword principle cultivation had been there for a long time. He had been comprehending the sword playing the world for a long time, but he had not had the opportunity to advance further. As for the flying sword technique of the Huan country's sword cultivators, Xiao Hua had been comprehending it since he obtained Li Xiubai and Immortal Bright Sword's Jade Slips. The Dream Slayer and Mountain Splitter were excellent proof. It could be said that Xiao Hua's comprehension and cultivation of sword principle had reached a very high level. However, because Xiao Hua did not have time, he did not condense sword essence. After arriving at Sentry City, he knew that the Dao sect had a unique method of detecting sword essence, so he did not dare to act rashly. But now, he had obtained the Changbai sect's secret technique and the secret technique to directly transform sword qi into sword essence. At this time, it was really a matter of course for him to cultivate the flying sword principle. To put it simply, Xiao Hua's sword path cultivation was like a pond. It had been dug out long ago, but no water had been let in, so it couldn't form a beautiful scenery. Now, after a long drought, the rain came from the sky and filled the pond with water. The pond was like a bright pearl, a beautiful scene indeed. Seeing that the vital essence in his body was becoming more condensed and pure, and the sword essence was flowing smoothly in his body like a river of stars, Xiao Hua's mouth unconsciously hung a smile. Of course, at the same time, he had some doubts in his heart. Xiao Hua did not know that his physical body was formed from the flesh and blood of the demonic phoenix, and this flesh and blood had been infiltrated by the chaotic qi. He only knew that his physical body was strange, and that all magic treasures could not fuse with his body, which was very different from other cultivators. However, the sword essence of this sword cultivator could circulate in his body and outside his meridians, which surprised him a little. Unexpectedly, he also discovered that although the sword origin was flowing freely in his body, it seemed to have some connection with the location of his middle dantian. However, Xiao Hua's middle dantian was sealed. He could only make some guesses based on the trajectory of the sword origin. However, when Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the flying dream executioner and mountain splitter, there was a bitter smile on his face. Although these two flying swords flew according to the trajectory of the sword essence outside his body, they could only fly outside and could not fuse with his body. There was extreme helplessness in his joy. Maybe it's because of this. Xiao Hua muttered in his heart, "This young master's sword essence is so tough that it has already reached the illusory sword realm, but sword intent has not appeared. Since there is no sword intent, then this young master does not need to temper at all, which is why I can rush to such a realm in such a short time." This kind of secret technique to absorb sword qi, presumably the sword cultivators of the Huan country also know. But why don't they have so many illusory swords? I'm afraid it's the same as the Dao sect's cultivation. It has to be done step by step. The cultivation of a sword cultivator, on one hand, strengthens the primordial spirit brand in the sword spirit, and on the other hand, tempers one's own sword intent. This refining of sword essence is actually inferior. With only sword essence and no sword intent, one cannot enter the illusory sword or even transform it into a sword. I'm afraid, no one will simply absorb sword qi in the sword tomb like this young master. Of course, this young master is also helpless. If I don't absorb sword qi, won't this young master be swollen to death by this sword qi? Xiao Hua immediately found an excuse for himself. However, after reaching this point, this young master has once again reached the end. Sword qi, fragmented sword intent, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth are still endlessly pouring in. Although the sword origin looks incomparably pure, There is no sword intent of my own within it. All sorts of mottled and fragmented sword origin fill it. How can I enter the sword transformation stage? Looking at the situation around him and the situation of the Buddhist gold formation, Xiaohua was at his wits' end again. Things did not go as he expected, that there would be a mistake in the process of refining sword essence. The sword chi that was pouring in and wanted to destroy him would unexpectedly stop. Everything was the same as before, moving according to the trajectory. The inertia of this trajectory was so great that it was like a celestial phenomenon. Even the power of the heavenly lightning had imprisoned him, making it impossible for him to stop even if he wanted to. This young master's death is probably coming. Xiaohua was a little sad. This sword tomb is not only the grave of thousands of flying swords, but also the grave of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators. This young master is also going to turn into a purple flower. Thinking of the meaning of the sword tomb, Xiaohua naturally thought of the enlightenment he had when he first arrived at the sword tomb. These flying swords were broken here and laid to rest here. This is the final destination of their bravery in the past. Just like the countless brave swordsmen and cultivators, no matter what reason they fought, they did their duty and did what they should do. Their corpses are laid to rest here, so this place should be respected by all living beings, not destroyed and harassed. Yes, these broken swords have already understood this life. Let this sword tomb be famous throughout the world. Although this young master's name is not known by others, whether it is the terrifying phoenix or that fleeting nameless, I'm afraid that my name will go down in history. Even the phenomenon of this young master condensing his Dan in the sword tomb today will spread out. This young master is also a person whose name will shake the world, and also a sword that will rather break than bend. Chapter 2690. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's heart was filled with determination. That unbending tenacity was also transmitted to the sword essence. Clang! Clang! Two loud sword cries came from the dream executioner and mountain splitter. The two flying swords shook violently. Green and red sword lights were unusually dazzling. Even the sword essence inside and outside of Xiaohua's body was violently boiling. Xiaohua was stunned for a moment before he suddenly laughed towards the sky. Ha! That laughter was extremely joyous and bold. The ancients said that if you hear it in the morning, you will die at night. This life is enough. I didn't think that I would comprehend sword intent in this desperate situation. Sword intent, sword intent, it is the intent of flying swords. What is a flying sword? Sword. Sword. Swords are flying swords. Only swords are true sword intent. There are many sword intents among sword cultivators. Whether it's mountains, flowing water, flying flowers, snowflakes, giant wolves, or even flying phoenixes, they all use all things in the world to explain the essence of flying swords. They all use all things in the world to explain the true meaning of flying swords. Could it be a deviation? Could it be that they are neglecting the essentials? They have really forgotten that only swords would rather break than bend. A sword that stands between heaven and earth with benevolence, heart, truth, and emotions. A sword that does not fear evil, does not fear evil, does not fear wind, does not fear rain, is the true sword intent. Along with Xiaohua's lamentation, even ghost cultivator Huang Yi's tens of thousands of years of grief and comprehension were integrated into his comprehension. The dream executioner and mountain splitter slowly stopped following Xiaohua's comprehension. A fist-sized heart slowly emerged from the sword light. Then, this heart-shaped sword light suddenly expanded, transforming into a small sword several feet long. The dream executioner and mountain splitter merged into the heart sword. Moreover, the heart sword slowly expanded, and the refined sword essence rushed into it. As the heart sword expanded, the sword intent actually penetrated the confinement of Xiaohua's core and the lightning tribulation's confinement outside of the Buddhist gold great array. Weng, waves of sword cries came from Xiaohua's body, outside of his body, and even outside of the Buddhist gold great array. It was as if 10,000 swords were bowing down. All the broken swords and sword intents were bowing in front of this sword within the sword. Good. Xiaohua's body also began to flicker with sword light. Within the sword light, Xiaohua's body also began to show signs of transforming into a sword. Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but be overjoyed and thought to himself, if I can transform into a sword, I should be able to escape the confinement of this phenomenon. Rumble, there was a muffled sound of thunder, and the power of heavenly thunder suddenly rose. Although the sword light around Xiaohua's body didn't dissipate, his body returned to its original state, and he didn't even touch a hair that had transformed into a sword. What can I do? Xiaohua laughed bitterly in his heart. I'm afraid it's still because the sword intent and sword spirit can't fuse into the sword heart. Actually, Xiaohua was still wrong. Not to mention that he was currently in the middle of condensing his core, the celestial phenomenon was shackled, and the lightning tribulation was also hanging in the sky. How could it easily allow him to escape? After all, his body was forged from the flesh and blood of a demonic phoenix, and he had the bloodline of an earth dragon. How could he easily transform into a sword like the others? It's still not right. Xiaohua quickly had another idea. If my cultivation is not high enough, how can I perceive the concept of transforming sword? How can I touch the edge of transforming into a sword? That's right, within this Slayer dream is a split primordial spirit. It's not a projection of the primordial spirit. Xiaohua suddenly realized, this sword spirit is originally this young master himself, and I don't need to cultivate my primordial spirit like an ordinary swordsman. This young master only needs to strengthen his primordial spirit according to the sword spirit molding method, and it will be very easy to fuse with the sword intent, and very easy to form the sword heart. Damn it, Li Xiubai, Reverend Bright Sword, you two are really too powerful. Thinking of this Xiao suddenly understood the importance of the two's orthodoxy, and suddenly understood why the two didn't want to fight. With this kind of wonderful secret technique, as long as one carefully comprehended it, it would be easier for them to transform into a sword than an ordinary swordsman. Wouldn't the comprehension and research of such a secret skill be more attractive to the two of them than fame and reputation? More than that, when Xiaohua's gaze fell on the Slayer Dream and Mountain Splitter's heart sword, he murmured again. The heart sword emitted a faint radiance. This radiance was not only green and red, but it was of all kinds of colors. The mottled sword intent within the sword origin had now rushed into the heart sword and transformed into nourishment for the heart sword intent. The sword intent that had rushed into Xiaohua's body along with the sword light was also attracted by the sword within the sword. Like a myriad of streams returning to their origin, the flying sword slowly expanded, and the Dream Executioner and Mountain Splitter actually faintly showed signs of fusing with it. Wasn't this the sign of the sword spirit and sword intent fusing into one? The sword light flashed, and sword chi soared to the sky. Xiaohua's heart sword intent was just at the initial stage, growing like a newborn calf, unexpectedly showing signs of breaking through the restriction. Xiaohua was overjoyed when he saw this. The sword intent was growing strong. Wasn't that his hope of breaking through the restriction? However, this joy only lasted for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. The endless sword intent crazily poured in, and the growth of the heart sword had already exceeded Xiaohua's control. The primordial spirit of the Dream Executioner felt as if it was floating, as if it was infinitely expanding. Xiaohua could only smile bitterly again. He understood in his heart that he had succeeded in condensing the sword intent, and the sword heart had also taken an embryonic form. However, he had already walked far enough on the path of sword cultivation, and the previous decades of accumulation had been completely exhausted. If the sword intent continued to grow, it would already be out of his control. It might even cause another incessant expansion. Not to mention the Slayer Dream and Mountain Splitter, even everything from before would turn into flowing water. He could only take the sword intent back into his body while he could still control it. It's really like holding a gourd and a ladle floating up. He almost reached out his hand to hold his head. Is this good? Xiaohua was almost racking his brains. That's right, the tranquil deer sword intent. Xiaohua immediately thought of Reverend Brightsword's flying sword that he had obtained from the valley. Xiaohua had previously thought of taking the tranquil deer sword intent for himself, but since he didn't have any sword essence, he could only treat this as a delusion. The tranquil deer sword intent had only been used once to kill Qin Jian, and had never been used again. Perhaps it could be used here? Thinking of this, Xiaohua quickly took out Reverend Brightsword's flying sword. The moment the flying sword appeared in the air, it immediately let out a sharp sword hum, and at the same time, it let out a resplendent sword light. The sword light was like breathing, and the sword hum was like a challenge. The tranquil deer walked out from the flying sword with the sword light, and its originally tranquil eyes were now filled with a trace of irritation. The tranquil deer let out a soft cry, and its body shone brightly. As expected, an extremely large amount of sword chi separated from it and flowed into the tranquil deer sword intent, and the tranquil deer's body gradually expanded. Roar! After half a cup of tea's time, the tranquil deer sword intent let out an angry roar, and actually turned into a white tiger, and roared at the heart sword. Clang! Xiaohua's heart sword intent was not afraid of this at all. With a sword hum, the sound shook the surroundings, scaring the white tiger so much that it trembled slightly. However, the sword origin of the white tiger did not retreat even half a step. Looking at the heart sword and the white tiger confronting each other, Xiaohua was dumbfounded. He let Reverend Brightsword's sword intent share the burden of the heart sword intent, and not let them fight each other. Quiet as a tranquil deer, moving as a fierce tiger. Reverend Brightsword's sword intent is actually of these two types. It's one level higher than Qin Jian and the others. Xiaohua sighed, and put away Reverend Brightsword's flying sword. The tranquil deer sword intent also helplessly fell into the flying sword. It's not enough to cause trouble. Forget it, I'll just put away the sword intent. Just as Xiaohua activated the sword origin and was about to put away the sword intent, he was a little unwilling. His heart moved slightly, and he stretched out his hand and patted his forehead. The 7 sword pellets refined in the Buddha fire were all taken out. The moment the 7 sword pellets jumped out, they immediately rushed into the heart sword intent, and the sword intent poured into the broken sword pellet like a sweet spring. Good, Xiaohua smiled again, let's count it as another way to make up for it. No matter what the outcome is today, this sword pellet can still be repaired. Just as Xiaohua thought, within the sword intent of the sword within the sword light, sword chi, and sword intent were all incomparably pure. It was the best supplement to repair the sword pellet. Of course, this was also the beauty of Xiaohua's 9 sword pellets coming from the same source. If it were other sword pellets, this kind of repair would only be incompatible and would conflict with each other. However, Xiaohua's sword intent was formed from Dream Execution and Mountain Splitter, and the 9 sword pellets complemented each other. Seeing the cracks on the 7 sword pellets healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, Xiaohua was delighted, but he was also a little scared. He had repaired the sword pellets for so many years, but he couldn't succeed. Looking at this situation, in a short day or even half a day, these 7 sword pellets would probably be completely repaired. From this, it could be seen that the sword chi that poured into the heart sword intent was enormous. If he couldn't control this sword chi, couldn't stop this sword chi from pouring in, then his end would be terrifying. Not only was the sword chi pouring in, at the side of the celestial body empowerment technique, the gold attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth was still pouring in. Xiaohua's newly created cultivation technique was still operating at all times. Fortunately, the meridians had just opened, and there was no true essence inside. If Xiaohua wanted to make up for the homework of the foundation establishment stage, he was afraid that it would take several years, or even more than 10 years. Xiaohua didn't need to worry about that place for the time being. Sure enough, in less than half a day's time, the 7 sword pellets were repaired one by one according to the order from big to small. All of them were incomparably round and flawless. If it was any other time, Xiao Hua would have already used the sword nurturing technique to project the primordial spirit of dream execution onto these 7 sword pellets. But these 7 sword pellets had just been repaired, and the sword intent began to increase again. Xiao Hua didn't dare to think too much, and hurriedly put the sword pellets back into the Buddha fire, and also put away the sword intent. However, just as the sword pellets fell into the small battle inside the Buddha fire, Xiao Hua was stunned. That damaged small battle inside the Buddha fire didn't give off the same green-red brilliance as the sword pellets. Even after several decades, there wasn't any change at all, like a pine tree biting down on a mountain without letting go. Chapter 2691. This small bucket must be a rare treasure. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he took out the sword pill and the small bucket together. Maybe it has some use? Xiao Hua had taken out a small bucket. It was completely different from when he had taken out Reverend Brightsword's flying sword and the 7 sword pellets. Everything he had done before had been intentional, and Xiao Hua knew that they would definitely be of some use. But this small bucket? Xiao Hua was purely trying his luck, purely trying it out. He didn't hold any hope. Who would have thought that the flowers planted with the intention would not bloom, but the willow unintentionally would grow? After the small dipper was taken out, there was no reaction at first, but when Xiao Hua raised the small dipper above his head, it was precisely when the sword energy, sword intent, and spiritual energy of heaven and earth poured in. Buzz. A faint, almost inaudible sound came from the small bucket, and all the sword chi, sword intent, and spiritual energy of heaven and earth fell into it, not leaving a single trace behind. Ah! There's no mistake. Xiao Hua almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. It's that simple? How could it be so simple? Who knows, in a while, this small bucket will burst. This young master had better hurry and leave. Xiao Hua almost didn't think and was about to stand up. Unfortunately, he only moved a little. The celestial phenomenon of condensing the core could be ignored. At worst, Xiao Hua wouldn't condense his core, but the confinement of the heavenly thunder didn't stop because Xiao Hua didn't condense his core. Instead, because of Xiao Hua's movement, Xiao Hua was firmly pressed down, and Xiao Hua couldn't even move. Isn't this forcing me? Xiao Hua naturally thought of that day during the lightning tribulation, when he couldn't struggle at all. I can only face the tribulation? Xiao Hua made a fuss for a long time, and in the end he still had no choice but to clap his hands and take out the 9 dry pills again. Into his mouth. The dry pills were indeed miraculous. As soon as he took them, along with the overflowing medicinal liquid, the true essence in his meridians solidified, and this solidification appeared in both his yin and yang meridians at the same time. The 2 solidified true essences, under the effect of 2 balanced suction forces, flowed along his meridians, and headed towards the light purple object in his dantian. It's actually at the same time? Xiao Hua frowned. He was afraid that there wasn't much true essence in the yang meridians, so he hurriedly moved the small bucket hanging above his head to the side, wanting to let some of the heaven and earth spiritual chi flow down. It was a pity that no matter how Xiao Hua moved, all of the metal attribute heaven and earth spirit chi fell into the small bucket. Not a single strand fell out. Damn it, why are you even more stingy than this young master? Xiao Hua was somewhat displeased, but at this moment, a hurricane appeared around Xiao Hua's body. Countless large crystals followed the hurricane and rushed toward Xiao Hua. This young master has been fooled by this sword tomb. Xiao Hua almost scolded himself. He had condensed his own core, and the surrounding astronomical phenomena were all prepared for him to condense his core. How could he lack the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? After scolding himself, Xiao Hua did not dare to hesitate. The crystals were pouring in too quickly, and even the dragon transformation art was unable to deal with it. He had no choice but to use both the heavenly body bestowment technique and the dragon transformation art to quickly refine the crystals and send them into his meridians. Xiao Hua even took a break from his busy schedule. Not only did he send the 7 sword orbs in the small bucket into the sword intent of the heart sword, he also took out the yin-yang sword gourd and sent it into the sword intent of the heart sword. The astronomical phenomena were indeed astronomical phenomena. Those large crystals looked very shocking, but they were the purest spiritual energy. When they approached Xiaohua's body, they immediately shrank rapidly, as if there was a Sumeru array around Xiaohua's body. They were all absorbed into Xiaohua's meridians by the heavenly body bestowment technique. Under the dragon transformation art and the mental cultivation method, these crystals were easily refined. Under the effect of the dry pill, they condensed into a solid state and fell into the suction force of the dantian. They followed the meridians and entered the dantian. However, there were so many crystals, and the speed at which they poured in was so fast that Xiaohua was really tired to deal with them. Hiss hiss. The yin-yang thunder pill that had been revolving in his dantian once again emitted electric light. The condensed true essence and crystals all fell into the electric light. At the beginning, that light purple object was only a cluster of illusory light. As the true essence and crystals fell in, that illusory light gradually solidified. This solidification was similar to when Xiaohua was refining pills. Strange runes appeared on it, and these runes flickered with the electric light, constantly overflowing. Immediately afterwards, the purple object trembled slightly. A black and white brilliance flashed, and a needle-shaped sphere visible to the naked eye appeared out of thin air. Rumble. Following the emergence of this needle-shaped sphere, Xiaohua's entire body trembled. The brewing heavenly thunder in the sky once again let out a sound, and all the spiritual energy that poured into Xiaohua's body once again sped up. It's condensing the pill. Xiaohua had a kind of realization in his heart. However, at this time, his mind was already clear. He didn't think about the lightning tribulation, nor did he care about the sword intent pouring in. Like a machine, according to his own feelings, he sent 9 dry pills into the air to maintain the solidification of his true essence. The dragon transformation art also didn't have any scruples. Ignoring the almost oppressive sound of thunder, it operated at an extremely fast speed, tempering his true essence. One day and night quickly passed. Xiaohua had taken no less than 600 dry pills, and he was practically taking them non-stop. However, the true essence that was pouring into his body and the true essence still showed no signs of stopping. Is there a mistake? Although Xiaohua wanted to keep his mind clear, at this time, he couldn't help but jump up and down. When I was building my foundation, I took 360 foundation establishment pills. Now that I've condensed my true essence, don't tell me I have to take 720 dry pills? Looking at the golden core in Xiaohua's dantian, it was now the size of a fist. Electric light lingered on it, and the 2 thunder cores on the left and right sides slowly rotated, occasionally sending lightning into the golden core. I'm afraid it has something to do with these 2 thunder cores. Xiaohua inwardly muttered to himself, because he already knew from Zhen Qing's Jade Strip that late-stage foundation establishment cultivators condensing their golden core was different from qi refining cultivators. There was a process of condensing the golden core, and it was also based on the cultivator's cultivation base. The size of the golden core was determined by the cultivator's true essence, and it took time. A short period of several days, a long period of several months, and even several years. For him to be able to condense his golden core into such a large and perfect size in one day and night, it was definitely unusual. These thunder cores were the most important. But I'm afraid I don't have many dry pills left. Xiaohua took a rough look and secretly complained, if it's 720 pills, it's barely enough. This Yu Qingtian storage pouch actually had 100 or 200 pills. They were his Yu family's many years of accumulation, and they were prepared to leave them for his disciples. I'm afraid these 700 pills won't be enough. That would be terrible. Where should I go to find more pills at this time? As the saying goes, fortune doesn't come in pairs, and misfortune doesn't come alone. Xiaohua was just thinking about the dry pills when the deafening sound of thunder fell down. Ah? Isn't this forcing me into a dead end again? Xiaohua already wanted to cry in his heart, but no tears came out. He really didn't understand. It was just a foundation establishment stage, just a core condensation stage. What kind of bullshit thunder tribulation was this? In Zhen Qing's jade slip, there was no record of this at all. Fortunately, Xiaohua had already experienced the baptism of thunder tribulation under the altar in the flame forest swamp, so he could be considered to have some experience. He hurriedly calmed his mind and slowly released his divine sense. Like a thief walking on tiptoe, he probed the sky outside the Buddhist gold grade array. However, his divine sense had only just reached a height of several feet when a strange voice unexpectedly sounded in his mind. This voice was somewhat distant and also somewhat vague. Who? Xiaohua was startled. This was the most critical moment for him, so how could there be any mishaps? After Xiaohua withdrew his divine sense, he pondered for a moment and felt that this voice didn't seem to belong to Little Yellow. Then who else could it be? That's right, Little White. Xiaohua suddenly realized and hurriedly entered the mysterious dark clouds. However, at this time, the mysterious dark clouds were different from usual. The entire dark clouds were no longer flowing like before and were almost completely stagnant. The soul strands that could easily enter and exit the dark clouds seemed to be imprisoned by thousands of times, extremely obscure. What's going on? Xiaohua had some doubts in his heart, but he didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly entered the heaven ring of aura. As soon as he entered the heaven ring of aura, an incomparably suffocating feeling rushed into his mind. Xiaohua, is there a thunder tribulation outside? Little White didn't wait for Xiaohua to speak and hurriedly asked. Yes, yes. Xiaohua was actually a bit hesitant. Little White wasn't like Little Yellow and couldn't be considered to understand too much. He still had some things that he didn't want Little White to know. Quickly send me out. Little White urged. What? You want to undergo thunder tribulation? Xiaohua was shocked. You're just a soul body, how can you withstand the baptism of heavenly thunder? Moreover, if your soul has condensed, you can, but right now, you're extremely weak. There's no need for the entire thunder tribulation, right? Just a trace of heavenly thunder tribulation can turn you into ashes, right? I've gone through thunder tribulation before. I still have some experience with this thunder tribulation. Little White knew that time was pressing and couldn't explain too much. He said concisely, my own thunder tribulation definitely won't appear at this time. This thunder tribulation isn't my thunder tribulation, you and I are just spectators. Even if we're affected by the thunder tribulation, we definitely won't suffer too much damage. In addition, the thunder tribulation is a death tribulation, but this death tribulation also breeds life. Haven't you heard of it? Thunder gives birth to all things, and this heavenly thunder is the most fertile. Everything in the world is born from the power of thunder. All right, if you want to refine this trace of your primordial spirit into an avatar, it's best to let it go out and undergo thunder tribulation. This is essential. What? This trace of my primordial spirit? Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How old is he? Won't he be turned into ashes in the thunder tribulation? Listen to me. Little White said, even if this thunder tribulation destroys this trace of your primordial spirit, your mind will only be damaged. What if it succeeds? The mystery in the future, even I can't explain it clearly. Chapter 2692. All right. Seeing Little White so anxious, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly waved his soul thread, and with great difficulty he sent Little White Dragon's soul out of the heavenly ring. The confinement of the lightning tribulation was really powerful. It directly penetrated Xiaohua's soul. To be able to send Little White Dragon out of the heavenly ring, he definitely spent a lot of effort. However, before Little White Dragon came out of the heavenly ring, it said something that almost made Xiaohua collapse. Besides, you were affected by someone else's lightning tribulation. When I come out, I can also guide you on how to avoid the tribulation. I can guarantee your safety. Damn it, this is my lightning tribulation. Xiaohua almost wanted to roar. However, there was no need for Xiaohua to say anything. As soon as Little White came out of the heavenly ring, it was immediately restrained by the heavenly lightning. Looking at the surrounding situation, How could it not know that this was Xiao Hua's own lightning tribulation? Little White was extremely shocked. It really couldn't understand how Xiao Hua, a cultivator from the human realm, could have a demon beast's lightning tribulation. Its entire soul swam a few times in the air with difficulty. It looked at Xiao Hua and originally wanted to ask, but seeing that the lightning tribulation was about to arrive, where was the time to dawdle? However, when it saw tiny dough in the air, its body began to tremble. Roar! The little white dragon opened its mouth wide and let out a dragon's roar. Its entire body soared into the air and began to slowly swim around tiny dough. Little White flew up. Xiao Hua was a bit hesitant. Little White's words were a kind of temptation. After the primordial spirit was divided, the growth was slow. If it was really like what Little White said, the primordial spirit could become an independent body, then it was worth a try. Let's do it. How many tribulations can there be in life? Xiao Hua clenched his teeth. Several primordial spirits that could come out were all sent out by him. Naturally, Xiao Hua didn't dare to leave these primordial spirits under the lightning tribulation. That was no different from a naked woman standing in front of a pervert. After Xiao Hua sent these primordial spirits into the heart sword, he released all the soul threads in the heavenly ring. Even the Buddha's Saraira was sent out by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua really didn't care about the consequences of taking advantage of the situation. After doing all this, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. He released his divine sense once more, probing the air. Alas, fortunately, Little White Dragon is already so excited that it is wholeheartedly preparing to face the tribulation. If it sees that Xiao Hua actually has so many primordial spirits, I'm afraid it might fall from the sky. At this moment, the sky was filled with dark clouds, and it couldn't get any lower. Although Xiao Hua's spiritual force couldn't completely see through the dark clouds, it was obvious that the range of the dark clouds had already exceeded the size of the last time Xiao Hua built his foundation. Moreover, the black clouds had a dark red color. The dark red color constantly flickered and rapidly surged, as if there was endless thunder water rolling within. Looking at the edge of the black clouds again, there were strands of heavenly lightning that were as thick as a thumb jumping around faintly. Occasionally, there were a few strands of lightning that actually had a kind of bright golden color. This golden color was clearly different from the first lightning tribulation Xiao Hua encountered. Kacha! A sound of thunder flashed from where Xiao Hua's spiritual force was probing. It was as if the building was overturned, and a series of sounds spread in all directions, stretching for more than 100 li, that incomparably oppressive, incomparably solemn, and even incomparably terrifying heavenly lightnings might had already enveloped the entire Buddhist gold great array, and within 100 li of this might was within this might. Alas, today's lightning tribulation seems to have come a bit early. After Xiao Hua's spiritual force probed out, he immediately withdrew it, fearing that he would be hit by the lightning tribulation. When he built his foundation for the first time, the lightning tribulation descended following the completion of his foundation. Although Xiao Hua was somewhat caught unprepared, it wasn't to the point of being flustered. But now, there was still a small amount of true essence in his meridians that hadn't solidified. The golden core in his dantian was admittedly the size of a fist, but in reality, it wasn't complete. Now that the lightning tribulation struck down, what do you think Xiao Hua should deal with first? Feeling that the heavenly lightning's might was even fiercer than the previous heavenly lightning's might, the remaining true essence in Xiao Hua's body began to gradually solidify, and could no longer freely flow. Moreover, with a rumbling sound, a burst of silent thunder resounded in his heart, and a burst of indescribable fear emerged from Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua understood that the lightning tribulation had already begun. Immediately, everything around him and even within his body couldn't move. He could only rely on his physical body to welcome the lightning tribulation. At this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly quivered. Damn it, my true essence has already solidified. Why can't this young master take advantage of this moment to condense his golden core? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and no longer cared about the number of 9. He took out the remaining dry distance pills, and threw them all into his mouth. Kacha! A series of oppressive sounds of heavenly thunder resounded, and a thread of lightning as thick as a thumb, sparkled with golden light, was born from the dark clouds, and directly fell down. When that lightning fell on the Buddhist gold great array, it suddenly sprinkled down, and unexpectedly turned into a golden lightning net. That Buddhist gold great array was like snow that met with boiling water, and instantly disappeared. The lightning net fell down, and a part of it fell on Xiaohua's body, and another part fell on Xiaohua's soul, and even more fell on Xiaohua's body. That kind of indescribable pain was born in Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua really wanted to throw his primordial spirit into space to avoid this kind of discomfort, but at this time his primordial spirit was firmly controlled within his body, and it was simply impossible for him to move. Moreover, after this kind of indescribable pain, an even more intense pain drowned Xiaohua like a tide. Needless to say, this pain came from the primordial spirit within the heart sword. Although Xiaohua's willpower was firm, in front of this kind of pain that was 10 times more painful, he was still on the verge of fainting. Damn it, little white dragon! Xiaohua really regretted that he was too soft, too greedy. Last time, when this young master faced the lightning tribulation, I still had the phoenix celestial body to resist it, but this time. Xiaohua was in pain, and he unconsciously thought of the celestial body he lost. At this moment, his body was filled with golden lightning, and his body was instantly torn apart. However, at the same time, the 132 million tiny dots flickered with lightning, flickering in and out of existence. Occasionally, they would undergo nirvanic rebirth, and the fleshly body would instantly heal. Naturally, the lightning tribulation this time was the same as before. Not only did it penetrate his body, it also penetrated deep into his meridians. His already orange bones were covered with lightning, and those lightning threads quickly swam above Xiaohua's bones. Not only was the majority of the blood threads that were torn out of his body absorbed by his bones, but the lightning threads also penetrated into his bones, and the orange color on his bones increased. The blood threads that didn't have time to be absorbed by his bones slowly fell, entering his meridians and dantian. Within his meridians, under the operation of the dragon transformation art, the meridians that were also torn apart by the lightning were constantly being reconstructed, as if a crazy dragon was waiting to be reborn. Within his meridians, the true origin that had yet to solidify quickly solidified under the effect of the heaven separation pill. Moreover, because of the lingering lightning, these true origin condensed into lumps and rushed into his dantian under the push of the lightning. But the strange thing was, these lumps were different from the true origin that was sucked into the gold core before. They couldn't fuse with the gold core from before, but instead closely followed the male and female lightning cores, circling around the fist-sized gold core. As for the lightning threads that followed the meridians into his dantian, they were once again attracted by the male and female lightning cores and rushed into them. Boom, boom. 2 crisp sounds rang out, and the male and female lightning cores were actually smashed into pieces. However, at this time, there was a little bit of blood in his dantian, and those blood threads were not afraid of the lightning. The blood threads penetrated into the lightning core, and at the same time, the lightning core rotated and slowly solidified. The dragon transformation art within Xiaohua's meridians was like a coiling dragon, and under the small battle in midair, the soul of the little white dragon was a real coiling dragon. But when the lightning came down, the little white dragon's soul was immediately destroyed by the terrifying lightning tribulation as soon as it came in contact with the lightning threads. However, the remaining little white dragon, which was only the size of a little finger, was once again surrounded by lightning threads, and seemed to have more vitality. The entire soul emitted a strange fluctuation, and threads of silver light seeped out from the small battle, landing on the little white dragon's soul, and the soul actually solidified within the lightning threads. Looking at the Buddha's Saraira, it was also somewhat different from the lightning tribulation from before. The entire Saraira was also first shattered by the incomparably sharp lightning, and then slowly regenerated on the lotus seat of the Buddha's Saraira, solidifying bit by bit. The regenerated Buddha's Saraira was clearly repaired in many places, and the color of the Buddha's Saraira was also much brighter. Next to the Buddha's Saraira, the sword intent of the heart sword also flashed with lightning. This lightning scattered the heart sword in an instant, but after the heart sword was scattered, the benevolent heart did not disappear, and a faint heart-shaped sword image flashed with lightning, enveloping the dream executor, mountain splitter, and the 7 sword orbs. Even the 2 flying swords and the 7 sword orbs were also surrounded by lightning. Xiao Hua's pitiful primordial spirit and the soul threads that stretched out from the heaven ring disappeared in an instant under the lightning tribulation, almost like the sunlight shining through the darkness. However, at the place where the primordial spirit disappeared, an extremely faint, almost undetectable fluctuation suddenly appeared the moment the primordial spirit disappeared. This fluctuation followed the flickering of the lightning threads to the place where the soul threads disappeared, and then followed the traces of the soul threads into the Law Eye's soul mark, and rushed into the mysterious dark cloud. The mysterious dark cloud's location changed even more. The entire dark cloud trembled violently, and countless lightning flashed within, rumbling loudly. It was almost comparable to the lightning tribulation that wreaked havoc on the sword tomb. The fluctuation that entered the mysterious dark cloud rushed inside, and the entire dark cloud swelled. Then, lightning flashed in all directions, and the fluctuation returned with the lightning. After passing through the soul threads flashed with brilliance and gradually took shape. After passing through the soul marks in the Law Eye's soul marks also trembled rapidly, and with this trembling, the Law Eye on Xiaohua's left hand also responded. However, Xiaohua did not notice this change at this time. When the fluctuation returned to the place where the primordial spirit disappeared in the heart sword, the fluctuation became even calmer. A dot of black and white appeared from the fluctuation, and with the appearance of the black and white, lightning immediately rushed over, unceasingly attacking the newly born primordial spirit. Lightning birthed all things. It was indeed so. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.